Let me introduce you to Rachel, the app that we're going to develop in this course, which allows us to speak with ChatGPT, give it a human voice, and have it perform any task we see fit. In the course, ChatGPT, or Rachel, is going to be an interviewer and interview us for a retail job. She's even going to be a Spanish teacher, teach us Spanish, and then start selling us a trip to the Maldives. So there's a lot of prompt engineering and different use cases that we can give to Rachel. So I'm going to show you how to build this. But right now, Rachel's function is to be my friend, to be nerdy like me, and to enjoy talking about science and space. So let's see how she does. Hey, Rachel, did you see the first Matrix movie?
Yes, Sean, I've seen it about 1,000,000 times. We really need to find some new material to geek out over.
Ah, definitely. What sort of material have you got in mind, Rachel? What have you been looking at?
The double slit experiment never ceases to amaze me. Particles behaving as waves and collapsing into a particle when observed. It's a mind-boggling example of the strange mysteries of quantum mechanics.
Oh, I know, right? It's absolutely crazy that a particle is both a particle and a wave until it's observed. We definitely think on the same wavelength. Sorry for the dad joke there, Rachel.
Haha, no worries, Sean. Speaking of mind-boggling mysteries, did you know that black holes have a boundary called the event horizon, beyond which even light cannot escape? It's fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
What? That's crazy. What would actually happen if I floated into the event horizon of a black hole?
If you floated into a black hole's event horizon, the gravitational force would be so strong that you'd be stretched like spaghetti due to tidal forces. This process is ominously named spaghettification.
Wow, that's absolutely mental. Are there any movies coming up that you recommend I watch?
Well, if you're into sci-fi movies, Dune is coming out soon. It's based on a classic novel and promises to have some epic world building and interstellar political intrigue. Plus, it has an amazing cast, including Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya.
I mean, it's absolutely incredible. It's so much fun. I have made Rachel to be super sarcastic at times and even push my family to being quite upset with me at some of the comments that she made, but it was hilarious. It was so funny. We were laughing out loud. I've been really impressed with how she can handle sales, etc. And it is amazing what we can get out of this new AI technology, leveraging ChatGPT and the human sounding voices of 11 Labs. Not only that, it's incredible at how easy it was to actually go and build this. And I cannot wait to give you the insight into exactly how I did it and how you can do it too. So to partake in this course, you will need access to OpenAI. So make sure you've either got access to a free trial with them where you can use free tokens, etc. if they're still offering that, and that you have access to 11 Labs, who right now are offering a free trial, or they even offer you a free amount of tokens per a month. So make sure that you've got an account with them and with OpenAI and that you're familiar with the terms. Otherwise, you won't be able to go and use those technologies.
Good luck to you all. I have no doubt that with your hard work and determination, you will master the Rachel Chat app in no time.
If this excites you as much as it excites me, I know you will get right to the end of this course, and I can't wait to see you over there. Let's talk about our course structure. Of course, we're starting here with the introduction. The introduction is going to take you through exactly what you're going to learn, how you're going to learn it, and explain just a very small amount of the theory so that when it comes to the practice side, you're not left completely in the dark. And then what we're going to do is move on to the React crash course. Now, the React crash course is literally just a bonus. I added it to this course in case you viewing this have not had experience with React. And you might have had some experience with JavaScript. I hope so, because that's a prerequisite for the course. You've had some experience with JavaScript or TypeScript. You've wanted to learn React, but it just takes too much time. You haven't got there yet. Well, here I give you the absolute bare bones crash course. And within a couple of hours of going through those videos, you will get the gist of React. And React is an awesome JavaScript framework. There are many frameworks we could have used, but I chose to use React because this is an industry standard. And so I gift that to you as a bonus, just so that you can feel confident moving into the rest of the course. Then we're going to move into the environment setup. This is where we're going to get our folders set up with our backend and our front end. I'm going to talk more about that in the up and coming videos. But the backend is going to be the engine. It's the thing that's going to do all the logic for you. And the front end is essentially going to be what you are going to interact with. So the user is going to see, touch, and feel. And so we need to set up the environments for that and get both the engines up and running. Once you've done that, we're going to jump into the backend build. We're going to build that backend engine. You're going to be able to communicate with OpenAI, 11 Labs, etc. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But you're going to be able to do all of that with your backend, and it works with Fast API, so the actual code running is super fast. Then we're going to do our front end build, and because by then you definitely will know enough about React to do that, we're going to interact with that back end and build our Rachel chatbot. And in doing so, we're going to get Rachel to actually go ahead and interview us. So there's a number of use cases for Rachel. In building Rachel, we're going to make her an interviewer, and she's going to interview us for a retail position. And then we'll change it up a bit later on after that to show some other use cases that you can code into Rachel as well with prompt engineering. But that's what we're going to do, to interact with Rachel. And then finally, in the next steps, I'm going to take you through, number one, what are those other prompts that you can consider putting in so that you can turn Rachel into being whatever use case you want to turn Rachel into. And I had a lot of fun. In fact, I have to apologize now. You will even hear sections of me laughing whilst coding because some of the responses we get from Rachel are just so awesome and exciting. And then finally, I'll take you through where can you develop from here? What other resources are available to you? And what am I personally working on right now? You know, what business venture or coding venture have I got that I'm developing with this technology in the background? How are we going to build a chatbot that can receive our voice, understand what we want, and then talk back to us in a human sounding voice with a very intelligent answer? Well, the first thing we need a front end and we need a back end. Now, please make sure that you are using Google Chrome. Do not use a different browser. I have not tested this on all browsers. Google Chrome is fantastic for web development and it's what is recommended. So please update your version of Google Chrome. Make sure that you have a version that is at least from the year 2022 and onwards. And that is the first step. And then on the back end, we're going to be doing all of our programming with Python. On the front end, we'll be using JavaScript because we'll be using React. Talk more about that. And on the back end, we're going to be using Python. Now, our backend will consist of Python, but it will also consist of Fast API, which is essentially written with Python. And Fast API is going to allow us to write Python code and build our own REST API. So this is basically a bunch of URLs that we will create that we can call. And when we call those URLs, they will return to us a response, i.e. when we send them a voice file, they will send us back the message from AI converted to a voice file. And they'll do that like this. We have Fast API, we have ChatGPT or OpenAI, we'll call it, and 11 Labs. And so Fast API is written with Python and OpenAI will be our brain. It will be the AI that can understand the conversation buildup that we store, etc., and spit back some kind of information. And then 11 Labs will take that information and convert it into a human sounding voice. And our backend will look something like this. We will have our imports, and this will be on a Python file. We'll call it main.py. And then we're going to bring in something called cross-origin resource sharing. CORS, or cross-origin resource sharing, make sure that our front end can talk to our backend, and we can set up security to do so. And I will talk you through, if you were putting this on your own domain, whatever .com or .ai or whatever, how that works and what you would need to do to update that. And finally, we will do a health checkpoint. This just makes sure everything is up and running. So those are just the basics of the backend. Once we've done all of that, we are going to create our main API route. So this will be our endpoint. It will be called post audio. This is where we will send an audio file. It will take that. It will then do the following. So it will save that audio input. It will convert the audio to text using OpenAI Whisper. It will get the chatbot's response, and that chatbot is ChatGPT. It will then go and add that to the chat history so that the conversation builds up and ChatGPT gets to understand the whole conversation of what's happening. And once we have that response from ChatGPT, we will convert that from text to speech using the 11 Labs AI. 11 Labs is amazing. Their voices are incredible. They sound so human-like, as you would have heard already. Now, that will then connect here with our front end. And this is what the full picture will look like. We will have our front end, which is in Google Chrome, talking to our back end, which is a server essentially running our own REST API. And all of the Python logic will be there on the back end talking to the front end. Now, how will the front end work? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next video. Now, we need to make Rachel Chat interactive. We need to be able to click this record button and have it send an audio file and have a user be able to see what's actually going on. So how will we do that? Well, the first thing we do is we start off with this wireframe. Now, if you want to know how I did this wireframe, I used Excalidraw. You can just Google it. It's an amazing tool. I use it for so many different things, and it's free, easy to access. You don't even have to log in. It's brilliant. And what are we going to build this actual front end with? Because we can see we have a title section at the top. We have this middle section where the chat happens and the bottom section where we hit record. It's very self-explanatory, but what are we actually going to build it with? Well, we are going to use React. And React uses something called components. Now, if you know what React is, you can just fast forward or skip this video because you already will understand what we're trying to do here. But for those of you who are new to React, well, there's luckily a bonus section straight after this where you can have a crash course into building a random betbox application with me just to get into it. But I want to give you the theory up front here right now. And so the way React works is it works with components. And everything is a component, right? So for example, here you have your root component now highlighted in blue, right? So this is our application. Everything's a component and you can make anything you want a component. And so if I was to go and divide this application, and this is subjective, it doesn't have to be done the way I'm about to do it, but if I was to go and divide this application into different components, I could do it like this, right? So these orange boxes are then components. There we have child level 1, child level 1, child level 1, and we have 3 of them. So 3 boxes here. Now, why are these all child level 1? Well, they are all happening within our root component. So they are children of the parent. The parent is the root component, and the children are these orange boxes here. And so everything we code, and I'll show you a snippet of what that code looks like, you'll get very familiar with it because that's pretty much all we do in this course. It's very hands-on. It's a lot of coding. But the way it looks in code is you essentially have these functions, these components, and they are children of that parent. But you can also have children of those child components. And so of course here we have, child level 2, and that component at the top has one, the middle one has one, the bottom one also has one. I haven't added it here, but I just wanted to make the point that not every component has to have child components. You can have some components that do not. And so essentially what happens is if you have a value, say, stored in the root component, that value can be passed to a child component. And then that child component can pass that same value to the next level child component. And so what you have are these components, which once they're built, they can also be reused. I'll give you an example. You can see how the middle section has a chat bar, and it looks very similar to the chat bar on top of it. This is where the audio message comes out, right? They look almost identical. Well, the reason for that is they are the same component. And it's the same component just being rendered out twice. And depending on whether it's my voice or Rachel's voice, it'll align it to the left or the right, but it's still the same component. And so really what you need to think about when you're thinking of React is boxes within boxes, components within components, and you can add as many as you want to. And once you have one, you can duplicate it as much as you like. It's built once, it's one set of code, and you can just insert that component wherever you want to. Now, what does a component look like? Well, it looks something like this, right? So we are importing a component here into our app function, and this app function is a component in and of itself. So for example here, look at where it says function app. Well, it's just a function, but it's returning something that looks like HTML. So you should know what HTML, JavaScript, CSS is. If you don't, you're really going to struggle with this course. Again, that's a prerequisite for doing the course, but it looks just like HTML. And this is actually called JSX. So it's like a JavaScript version of HTML. So we will essentially code up our website in this very HTML looking language and do that within these functions. So these functions will return that code to structure the HTML, etc. And then you can see there's this green tag, which also looks like HTML, but it's this green tag over here, and it's the imported controller. So the controller is actually a component, which we called controller. And then here within our app component, we imported our controller component and displayed it as part of the HTML returned out. Now, if we go a step further here, you can see there we have our app component. That is a parent component. And then if we go down here, we can see the controller component is a child component. So this is really great and very powerful because that controller component will have its own file with its own code that looks a lot like this. It will have function, controller, etc. And it's very straightforward because now you can just basically use these JavaScript functions to create components. Now, one thing you will also note is that you don't just have to go and pass. If we go back here, you don't just have to pass values from one component to another. You can also pass functions as well. And I'm not going to go too much into that, but it's very, very powerful. And so the idea behind React is a very, very powerful one. Now, how are we actually going to go and do the styling of all of this? Well, again, that we will cover in the next video. Given that we know we're going to have JSX essentially through React spitting out some HTML, we need to style it. We need colors, we need font sizes, we need spacing, we need all of that. So how on earth are we going to do such styling over here? So as an example here, you can see with the wireframe, we need to turn this drawing into something that actually looks like this really nice picture with a background color, a microphone, etc. Now, the way that we're actually going to do this is we're going to use something called Tailwind. And Tailwind is a fantastic solution for solo developers because it dramatically speeds up, in my personal experience, development time. When I first learned website building, for those of you who are old enough like me to remember Dreamweaver, I used Dreamweaver and I used to code websites with HTML, CSS, etc. in this Adobe software called Dreamweaver. And of course, with CSS, you have to create a file, you have to do all your styling in that file, you have to import that file. And in React, usually you would create separate style sheets for your components and import those in. Well, there's a number of ways of doing it, but it can all get a bit cumbersome when you just need to get something functional working off the ground so that people can interact with it and use it. Speed is a weapon, and it's very important, I think, when it comes to rapid fire testing and any kind of lean startup scenario. And so Tailwind, in my experience, makes that far, far, far easier and quicker to do. So traditionally in CSS, you'd have something that looks like this, right? You'd have your HTML with your body tag, then you'd have your style tag, and you'd create a style called header. It would have whatever color, width, padding, whatever it is you wanted to give it. And then you would have a separate div tag, that would then reference as a class that header, and it would give all those properties to header, right? That's your traditional CSS, and actually that style section would be in its own sheet. Well, with Tailwind looks more like this. And because I'm using React here, it's not class, it's class name. So if you're used to using class, just bear in mind with React, everything is class name. And you can see with Tailwind, we just do it all in the class. We call it text blue 500, width 5 pixels, padding 5 pixels, and then again, hello, Rachel. So what is the advantage of this? Well, number one, it's very, very quick. I don't have to work between different sheets. I can actually see the styling where I'm editing the actual HTML, and I can test things very, very quickly live to see how are they looking, etc. Now, for those of you who have used Bootstrap in the past, you'll see it's a very similar idea where you can just bring in these classes, for example. But the difference with Tailwind is it's lower level. You can really customize more of what you want. Now, the only thing with that is it can mean that you have these very long strings with your styling, with your CSS code that you're now writing directly into the class. Now, I do encourage you to go to Tailwind's website and read through some documentation if you've never seen it before. It's extremely easy to pick up, and you will do it naturally just by following along with what I do and code with you. So with all of that said, this is the theory. I told you, this is a hands-on course. I'm not here to talk detail about. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code extensively through this course, so I highly recommend that you use Visual Studio Code as well, so that everything is the same, the plugins are the same, and it looks the same, etc. Now, you don't have to use Visual Studio Code. Obviously, if you're a seasoned developer, you can stick with whatever you prefer, whether it's NeoVim or Vim, something funky and cool like that, or Atom, or anything else. I'm going to use VS Code. So if you haven't got your IDE set up, please go and download VS Code now, and then just go and open it. You can see I've got it open here, and I want to show you the extensions that I'm using. So it's going to be very important that we're using the same extensions. So the first one that I recommend you have installed is this auto close tag, and it looks like this. You can just go to extensions here on the left and search for auto close tag. I'm also using auto rename tag, and this is going to make it very, very easy so that when we go and update HTML, or in fact JSX, which is what we're going to be using, then it will auto update the bottom tag along with whatever change I make to the top, and vice versa. So that's something that will be very useful. And the auto close tag just makes sure that when I create a tag, it then creates the opposite tag to close it. The other thing is we're using React, so please install this ES7 Redux React Native snippets, because I'm going to be using snippets to create React functions, rather than typing them all out each time from scratch. So this is going to save a lot of time. You don't have to have it. You can just basically type out what you see me put on the screen, but this should also save you a lot of time. So you can see here who that's by, and just go and download that. And then here I've got iSort here as well. This is a Python download. And then if I just scroll down a little bit more over here, you will see I also have Prettier installed. So Prettier just makes sure that your code is nice and neat. You can go and look up Prettier if you're not familiar with it to learn how to use it. But this just makes sure that my code is very neat when I'm working with TypeScript or JavaScript. So you'll see me hit save, and my code will just auto neaten up very quickly. And it's not because I'm pausing the video, it's literally, it happens for me, it's done for you. So that's something I also really recommend downloading. Now I've got IntelliSense with Python as well downloaded. And then finally at the bottom, Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. So again, if you're typing something out, what IntelliSense does is it essentially just makes sure that it shows you what it thinks you want to type out. So when I'm working with Tailwind, I'll type something and then it will know what color I want, or it will be able to make suggestions on what else I might want to add to what I'm typing out over there. And then frankly, Pylons, I can't even remember why I downloaded this, but just if you want everything the same as me, then please go ahead and download that as well. And again, if you're a seasoned developer, please, you can ignore this video. But for a lot of you, I found these videos when I was learning, especially doing a lot of Udemy courses. I loved it when developers would show me what plugins they're using, especially if I was new.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is open up our terminal. Now I'm going to do that by going over here to iTerm. So I'm on a Mac, I'm using iTerm. You can just use the straightforward terminal. It really doesn't matter. I prefer using iTerm. So I'm going to use this. If you're on Windows, it'll be your command line. So just go to your command line interface. And right now I'm in a folder called tutorials. You might be in your root directory. You can just make your own directory or CD into whatever directory you want. But we're going to call our project Rachel Chat. So here I'm going to say make dir Rachel Chat. Great. Now what I want to do is change directory into Rachel Chat as follows. So now I'm in Rachel Chat. So now I can do ls, and you can see there's nothing in the Rachel Chat folder. Now we want two other folders here. I'm going to go make dirs because I want to add a backend folder, which is going to be our fast API. And I also want to make a front end folder as well. So I'm going to repeat the same thing here. And when I look at this now with ls, I have a backend and a front end. Fantastic. Now, once you're in your folder, if you have VS Code set up so that it opens straight from your terminal or your command line, you can just go code, full stop, and hit enter. If that doesn't do anything for you, it's okay. You just haven't got your Visual Studio Code or IDE set up the way you want to. In which case, what you want to do is go to Visual Studio Code and just open it up. You can see I've got it over here. I've already got it open. And right now I'm in a blank project. I'm not in anything. So to actually go to the file, what I can do is go to File, Open Folder, and I'm just going to head over here now to Code. And I'm in my tutorials folder, and here it's Rachel Chat, right? So just go and locate the file that I just basically created, or the folder I just created, and I'm going to hit open there. Fantastic. We're now in our project, and I'm going to zoom into this for you so that everything's a bit larger and that it's much more easy for you to see what's going on. Now, I don't need this iTerm anymore, or my command line there. I'm going to close that down. And what I'm going to do here in VS Code is just create a new terminal, and I'm going to do everything right now from my terminal in Visual Studio Code.
All right, so we're here in our Rachel Chat folder in VS Code. Now, there's a few things that we need to check that you have set up. And in fact, what I'm going to ask you to do is to just open your command line terminal one more time. Again, I'm using iTerm. You can be using whatever you want. And I'm just going to zoom into this for you. The first thing I want to just check is that you have Python installed and you have the right version of Python installed. So for example, I can go Python -- version, and it will tell me, not found, Python. Now, yours might return something like version 2 point whatever. If it does that, you're pretty much in the same boat as what I've just showed you here. You need Python 3. So another way you can check that is by going Python 3 -- version. And hopefully something will come up like python.3. whatever it's going to be, but you need to make sure you've got Python version 3.6, 3.7 or above installed. Now, I've got Python version 3.9.6. Now, if nothing comes up for you, or you don't have Python 3 installed, just go over to Python, right? Python.org, and go to Downloads, select whether you're on Windows, Mac OS, or whatever, and download and follow the instructions for the latest version of Python. I'm not going to go through that in this course because it'll frankly take too much time for something that is abundantly available online, right? There's a lot of resources to tell you how to install Python, so just follow that. The other thing you'll want to make sure that you have installed is the Python package manager as well. And so there you can just go to, if you're on Linux, Python-M, ensure pip -- upgrade, Mac OS, it's basically the same, and Windows, slightly different, Py-M. You can also use getPy if you prefer, so Windows would be Py space getPy, getpip.py, and Mac OS Python getpip.py, which is the same as Linux. All right, so that's very important. Now, to check that you've got a version of that running, you can go pip3 -- version, or if that's not working for you, if everything's linked to pip, you can just do pip -- version. You can see I've got pip version 23 over here. So you can also go pip3 install -- upgrade pip as well. That will also upgrade and make sure you've got the latest Python package manager as well. So that's another thing that you can go and run. So it depends whether you're on Windows or Mac. You definitely need to have some familiarity on how to just make sure you have Python installed to progress from here. Now, it's not just Python that we need. We also need Node. And so you can go and download Node if you haven't already done so. And you can check that you have Node installed by going node -- version. And you can see I've got version 19.7.0. And it really doesn't matter if you have one that's lower than that, right? That's absolutely fine. You can download this 18.15.0 or whatever version it is by the time you're doing this. You just need to make sure you have a semi-recent version of Node. Now, something else that we're going to need is also Yarn. So these ones here, Node, Yarn, and TS Node, I'll talk through in a minute. These are all for JavaScript and TypeScript. And Python and pip, is for Python. And so that's going to be for our backend, and these three here are going to be for our front end. So Yarn is the next thing, and I prefer using Yarn to npm. So what we're going to do is do npm install global Yarn. So if you haven't already got Yarn installed, which you can check, you can go Yarn -- version, and you can see I'm on version 1.22.19. You would go npm install global Yarn, which I'm not going to do because I already have Yarn installed, right? So I don't need to do that. And finally, the next one is TS Node. So here you can do npm install -g for global TS Node, and TS Node is for TypeScript, so TypeScript node. And that's something else you can do there as well. So I can go TS Node -- version, and you can see I'm on version 10.9.1. Now, you don't have to, again, be on the exact same versions as me. If you want to, you could do something like npm, install TS Node, and then you could do something like and that would be 10.9.1 as follows. Right? So that would install TypeScript Node for you at that exact version. Great, so now that you've got all of that done, we are ready to progress, and I shall see you in the next video. So in this section, we're going to install the packages for our backend, which is Python and Fast API, and then we're going to get everything up and running for the front end. But let's start with the backend. So the first thing we need to do is change directory into our backend folder. So here I'm now in backend, and I want to go ahead and install my Python virtual environment. So here we just go Python 3-m for make venv as follows, right? So that should install our virtual environment. Now, if I go and open this up, you'll see I have a folder here. I don't even need to open it. You can see a folder there called venv as follows. Excellent. Now what we need to do is activate our virtual environment. And anytime that you want to go and run your backend, you will need to make sure your virtual environment is activated. So here we go, source venv bin activate with the forward slashes. Now, if you're on a Windows, it's likely that you won't use bin. You'll need to use script, venv scripts, sorry, activate. And that will do that for you on a Windows, but on a Mac, I activate it with bin. So when I do that, you can see here, I now have venv as follows, and I'm activated in that virtual environment. And this is where we're going to install all of our Python packages. So the first package we're going to install is OpenAI. So here I'm going to go pip3 install OpenAI as follows. Now, what I want to do is make sure that we have the exact same versions and we're singing from the same hymn sheets in this course. Otherwise, especially with Python, we're going to run into discrepancies between what I see and what you see or don't see. And so the version for OpenAI that we're using is equals 0.27.0. Enter. Now, if you do this and it doesn't work for you like it just did for me, if that didn't work, if it came up with an error, didn't tell you it was successfully installed, then just go pip3 install OpenAI. You don't have to do the version. It's just I'm trying to make sure we've got the same versions. Now, I'm working off of a Mac, an M1 Mac using an ARM architecture. And so it's installing things that work for this Mac. If you just go OpenAI as it is, it will figure out exactly what versions, etc., to install for you, but it should still work the same. So if you just go and do pip3 install OpenAI equals 0.27.0, it should work for you. But if it doesn't, then just take that away and do it as follows. Now you'll see I also have been told to upgrade my version of pip, and that's because I'm now in a new pip environment. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go pip3 install -- upgrade pip like follows. And that should go and upgrade my version of pip. Great. Let me go and clear my terminal. Now let's install some of the other packages, and we can do them all at once. So here I'm going to go pip3 install, and I'm going to want Python -decouple, and that is version 3.8. Space, I'm going to install some other packages. Python multipart or Python-multipart equals 0.0.6. Requests is going to be equals 2.28.2, and fast API is going to be equals 0.92.0. And just bear in mind, this is fast API now, not open API. Enter, and it should go and install all of those packages for us, which it has already gone ahead and done. Wow, that was quick. Now, if that didn't work for you, just try installing one at a time to see which one didn't work, and then change the version number or remove the version number, as I told you before. Now, one more installation we're going to need to do is going to be UVcorn. So just go pip3, so here pip3, install UVcorn standard, and it's going to be in these double quotes here, UVcorn standard. And if you're wondering how I got that or how I found that, so just go to fastapi.tiangolo.com, and you can go down here to tutorial, or just go to Google Fast API docs. It'll bring you here. Tutorial user guide, right? So here it's saying run the code, etc., how to get started. Down here you've got pip install fast API all, or you can just do pip install fast API, which is what we just did. We did pip3 install and the version, but then there's another installation down here, which is pip3 install UVcorn standard. And so that is how I knew how to go ahead and install this. So let's go back over here and hit enter, and that will install our packages. Now, what we need to do is just open this up again. You can see we're still here in the backend folder. Go to touch main.py like follows. Enter. And you'll see here now in backend, we have our virtual environment folder, which we've just been installing packages in because we're activated in that folder. But here we also have our main.py file. Now, if you go back to the Python docs and you go over to first steps as follows, you can just copy this text here just to check it's all working. So just copy this text here from the documentation and paste it in here. Or if you want to, you could probably type it out even faster than going and finding it and copying it. But this here is going to allow us to check that everything has installed and is working for Fast API. So per the documentation, to go and get that running, what we do is we run UVcorn main:\app --reload. And I'll tell you what the reload does in a moment, but let's just go and copy and paste that in here, hit enter. So UVcorn main app reload, and you should see something that looks like this on my terminal with all these green infos. Now let's go back over to the internet here and put in localhost 8000 as follows. So localhost :8000, and you should see this message, hello world. Fantastic. If you see that, everything is working for you. Now, watch what happens if I go here and just say something like print hello. I'm just going to put that here in the root. And when I go and save the file, you'll notice that it said warning, watch files detected. And what that means is it detected changes here in this py file, and so it's reloaded. And that is what that UVcorn main app reload -- reload does. So if I go back over here and I hit enter and I go back there, you can see it actually now printed hello. Now, if I stop that and I don't put the reload, and so now I'm going to say, instead of hello, I'm just going to say Sean and save that. If I just do UVcorn main app like follows without the -- reload, and I go and run this, it'll still work. You'll also see it has picked up Sean, but if I now go and change this back to hello and save it and run this again, it printed off Sean again. So it hasn't understood that there's a change. So if I was running this in a production environment, let's say you're hosting this as a chatbot on, I don't know, Amazon Web Services, and I've got videos on the Code Raiders YouTube channel showing you how to do that. There's a whole video series, 2-part series on how to do that. But if you were doing that, you would do this, you would run your bot as UVcorn main app, not with the -- reload. But because we're developing, we're going to want to put in this -- reload. So if I go and do that and run this or make any changes live, so if I put that back to Sean and I go and refresh my browser and go back, you'll see it's picked up that Sean change. Excellent. Now that we have our backend set up, we also want to go ahead and get our front end set up. So let's go and hit the plus sign here or create a new terminal. And what I'm going to do is just cd into front end as follows. And now you'll see I've got two terminals open, my backend terminal and my front end terminal over here. So let me just clear that. And now that I'm in front end, what I want to do is go and build my React project. So the way I'm going to do that is just go yarn, create Vite, because Vite is going to be our builder with a full stop, because we wanted to create it within the front end folder that we're already in, not create a new folder. Enter. Great. And then it says select your framework. I want to use React and I want to use TypeScript. Excellent. That is that done. Now, if I go and open my front end folder, you can see it's gone and built all of that. Now, pay particular attention here to this package.json, right? This package.json file, because this is where we need to make sure that we are all on the same page. Now, you will notice that there is an article here with a resources folder just before this video. So just go and click on this package.json. That will download the file for you. And then within your downloads, wherever you've downloaded that to, just drag it up here to the top window in your Visual Studio Code or whatever IDE you're using. And then here, I'm just going to say open. And you can see that this is a different package.json to this one. But what I want to do is just make sure we're going to have all the same dev dependencies and dependencies and also scripts. So what we're going to do is just copy this whole thing, just copy all of it and replace all of this package.json with that one, right? So there we go. We can save over that now. I'm going to close the one I just downloaded. And now I've got everything exactly the same as what is shown here in the course. The package.json should match exactly. Now, the reason for that is we need to make sure we're on the same page with the exact same versions, and I don't want you to have to go and type them all out manually. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to now install all of these exact versions, the exact ones that I've got, so that you don't run into any problems in the course. Here we're going to do yarn -- exact like such and hit enter. And that is now installing all of these packages here. Now you'll notice Axios is one of those packages. That's what we're going to use for making requests through the web. So we're going to call our backend from our front end using that. We're also using React Media Recorder. You'll see how that becomes very important for recording audio, etc. And we also have Tailwind CSS and Post CSS over here. And so we're going to finish setting up Tailwind fully. We're not going to do that right here. We're going to do that in the very next video, but that's another package installation. And the rest of it is really React and Vite and TypeScript. So we are now ready to rock and roll. You can see those modules have all installed. And so the way we can go and test this is we can go yarn and dev to test it in dev mode, or start to test it in production mode, you can think of it as. But let's just go yarn and dev, and it's telling us where it's currently running this. So just copy this URL that it's giving us here, which is on port 5173. Go over to your internet browser and paste that in and hit enter. And brilliant, we can see we now have React running, and we'll be able to go and edit all of this here. But we're not out of the woods yet. Right now, if we actually look at our project folder over here, we'll see we have all sorts of CSS and all sorts of stuff that we don't care about. We're going to go and remove all of that and get Tailwind set up, so that Tailwind and React are set up exactly how we want them in the next session. The next thing we need to get installed is Tailwind. Now you can see I'm on the Tailwind CSS documentation at tailwindcss.com/docs/guides/Vite. Now we've already installed our project, so we don't need to do that. We've already got all of this installed because we installed everything from that package.json that you copied over. But what I do want to do is this npx tailwind css init-p.
So here we're just going to go npx tailwind css init-p like follows. And you can see that has now created this tailwind config.cjs. And so we need to go back to the documentation here and copy this section here, just like it's highlighted for us, and go to our tailwind.config.cjs, not the post CSS one, the tailwind one, and replace the content with this over here that we just copied straight from the website so that it looks just like that. Excellent. And then in the index.css, we need to add this to the top. So we're going to copy that and just under the source folder, go to index.css and just enter this as follows. Just paste it there at the top. Now let's get rid of all of this CSS, everything except body. We'll leave body in there, and let's get rid of everything else. And within body, we'll leave margin as 0. I'm going to get rid of all of that there. Min width, min height. I think that's absolutely fine. We can keep it as such, but we really don't need any other CSS there. Now let's make sure Tailwind has worked for us. So if I go here to yarn dev and do what we did before and go and run this local host here in our browser. So where were we? We were over here. And you can see it's already updated. The CSS is completely changed already, but I'm not sure if Tailwind's working yet or not. So what I want to do is go back here and we're going to start deleting and removing a whole bunch of things. So here in app.tsx, just underneath here where it has your div tag, the first div tag, we're going to go all the way down here. We're going to remove all of that as follows. I'm also going to get rid of the React logo and the Vite logo links over there. And I'm just going to create our own div tag here to say hello, right? So I'm going to hit save there. And there we go. We can see hello. So it's looking promising so far. Now let's make sure that a few things are working. First of all, I don't need this app.css. So I'm just going to go and delete that there because now we're using Tailwind. And the index CSS I do need. So I'm going to leave that as is. Let's go back. Yes, everything is still fine. It's looking absolutely fine. And let's just go here to public. I don't need that feed SVG. You could replace that with your own logo. So if you had your own logo, you could replace that SVG with your own one, but I'll leave that as is for now. Okay, fine, perfect. And then within assets, I don't need this React SVG. So I'm just going to go and delete that there. So that can be moved to trash. And in fact, in assets as well, I'm going to remove assets completely like follows. Now you can see we're getting an error here that says import app.css is not working. So just get rid of this import app.css like follows. And you can see that it's now reloaded absolutely fine. And hello is now on the top left here. Excellent, looking good so far. Now let's add a class name here. And we're going to call this text-2xl and hit save. And then I'm going to come back here and you should see that your text is larger. If it's larger, congratulations, Tailwind CSS is now working and we can go and start doing things like saying background, blue 500. And there we go. We can now start styling our application using Tailwind CSS. In fact, we also don't need this class name app over here. So I'm going to get rid of that there because that was for all the old setup. I'm going to get rid of this const counts here and this use state over there. Excellent. Everything is now looking really, really clean. So essentially, all you need in your source folder, if you've missed any of that, is you need your app.tsx and with just a very basic function that looks exactly like this. Your index CSS just needs to look like that. And you can remove the assets folder within public. So where we had our assets folder, I went and removed that over there. Now, let's just stop this from running and go yarn build to make sure that this all builds. If it doesn't build, it means there's a problem and it will tell you what that problem is. And this here is building, which is excellent because then once you've built a package, you can go yarn start. When you go yarn start, this is now running on port 4173. So if I go here and I replace this here with the 4173 link, this is now no longer in dev mode. If I go and make changes here, it's not going to refresh here. So if you were running this in production on your web server, against your .com domain or whatever, that is how you would be doing it. You would be building it and then starting it. Whereas right now we're just going to run it on dev. So I'm going to cancel that and go yarn dev and bring it back exactly like it was before with 5173 like such. Excellent. That is our front end now completely set up and ready to go and rock and roll. So we don't need to cover that yet right now. I want to go and divert attention back to our backend. Now you'll notice I'm flipping between the two and I'm starting to do it more and more. And the reason I'm doing that is because when we're testing an app like this, really you are a full stack developer now. So you are going to be jumping between the backend and the front end. Usually you'll try and do as much testing in isolation. So you're only working on one at a time. But I really want to show you how these two apps connect together so that you get a really good feel for it. So we're going to jump between them. But in the next section, we're going to focus a lot more and very, very heavily on the back end and getting that ready. Then we're going to jump back to the front end later on and change it up as we need to update things. All right, you can stop any servers running both on the back end and the front end. And I'm just going to clear this here. So I've got my back end terminal and my front end terminal. Now let me minimize this and go back to my main.py, and I'm going to close any other files now that I don't need open. And I'm going to make sure here I'm on my backend terminal. Right, so now we're in the backend. And what I want to do is create an environment variable file. So touch space .env, and the dot's very important. That will create this .env file. Now, if you're not familiar with a environment variable file, what this is, it's a way to keep secret keys and private things private to make sure that people can't access them easily. So let's say your machine gets hacked or breached in some way, that these keys are privately kept. And so in the article just before this video, I actually gave you the link to go and get the keys. And so what I want you to do is go over to this .env file and perform the following operation. You're going to want to put in your open_ai_org equal to and your OpenAI org ID. So go and get that from your OpenAI account. You're going to want to do the same thing for the open_ai_key. So that's going to be your OpenAI key. So you can go and grab that. Remember, the org and the key are two different things. And then finally, you want to get your 11 Labs API key and just paste that in there. Now, just so that you can compare, my keys look a lot like this. So here you can see I have org-xo, etc. And yours might be different, but it should look similar to what I've got over here. And then here I've got my OpenAI key. So here I've got my secret key. Now I've modified this because it's never a good idea to share your keys with anyone, but I just want to show you what your keys should look like. And then here I have my 11 Labs API key. If you weren't able to find those, or those links for some reason have changed, just do a Google search for them or log into your accounts. So if you go and look at the article, you can see here that you go to beta.11labs.io for subscription, and then you just click on your profile, right? So you go to your profile image, then click profile, and you can get your key there. Your OpenAI key is here, and then you can just create a key and copy it over to where I just showed you, and then your org ID is exactly the same. You go here to accounts and then org settings, so different place, but also with OpenAI, and then just copy your org ID to this org ID there. So that should be all your keys sorted.
Remember the plan of attack to build our back end. The plan of attack is to bring in the imports, sort the cross-origin resource sharing, and create our endpoints. And in the main endpoint that we're going to create, we need to be able to save our audio input, convert that audio into text using OpenAI Whisper, get the chatbot response with OpenAI ChatGPT, add it to the chat history so that each response builds upon the next, and then convert that text that ChatGPT gives us back into speech and feed that back to our React application. And because we're focused on the back end, I'm not focused on this front end piece here, I'm focused on this back end piece. So what we're going to do is in this video is go through the imports and the cause and the health checkpoint and just get the, let's call it the standard stuff done and out the way. So just make sure that you are in VS Code and that you have your backend folder there and that you cd into backend if you're not already in there. So I've just cd'd into backend. Now, whenever I'm dealing with something like this where I don't use the commands very often in the terminal, is I actually put them at the top here. So remember to actually go and run our application. We just put uvicorn main :app. And if we want to run it and reload it, similar to with React when we do yarn dev, here we're going to do uvicorn, and that will be main app -- reload as follows. So now you can just copy and paste this rather than having to type it out all the time. And I also want to source into my virtual environment. So venv bin activate, just like we did in the environment setup section. Brilliant. So I'm in there now. Let's just check everything is running. And just then make sure that localhost 8000, and that's a colon there, localhost colon 8000 is running. There we go. Message, hello world. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Now let's bring in our imports. Here we've got from fast API, import fast API. We're also going to be working with files. So I'm going to bring in file, upload file, and also HTTP exception. Let's bring all of those in there. And these here will be our main imports. So I'll call these main imports as follows. Then from fast API.responses, I want to import streaming response because I'm going to need to send an audio file back. And from fast API.middleware, and that's .cause for cross-origin resource sharing, I want to import cause middleware as follows. And then here I want to, from decouple, and this is from that Python decouple package, import config. And this is going to allow us to bring in the environment variables that we saved in the environment setup section here in our .env into our actual application. And then here import OpenAI as follows. Brilliant. And then down here, when we build our actual functions out, which we will create a functions folder for, so let's do that now. Let's call this functions. We will import those here. So here I'm going to say custom function imports as follows. And those will happen around this area here. So app here, what is this doing? This is initiating our app. And that's just standard part of the Fast API documentation, but we also need to add in our origins. So what origins is this app going to allow? So let's say that, for example, you have your backend here running on domain api.rachelbot.com and your front end's on rachelbot.com, for example. Then api.rachelbot.com or whatever it could be, pinkelephants.com needs to accept any requests from rachelbot.com. And this is where you can dictate what domain URLs you will actually accept in your backend. So as part of your server. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say origins is going to be equal to an array, and that array is going to be made up of HTTP, localhost, and that will be 5173 because we are working a lot with 5173. And maybe you're actually going to have two apps open for whatever reason. So I'll add in 5174 just in case as well. And then here we also want 4173 in case we're running our built application from React. And also here we can do 4174. And another common one that many people do with front end applications is 3000. And that should be good over there. So that should give us all of our origins that we need to make sure we approve to call our server, which is in fact our backend over here. And then we need to also define the CORS middleware. So here we're going to say CORS middleware like follows. And you'll notice I like to annotate everything. app.add_middleware like follows, open and close parentheses this time. And so not an array, this is not a list, this is a function here essentially. And we're going to bring in CORS middleware, this is just standard code here, and we're going to allow origins, and that's going to be equal to the origins that we defined above. I also want to say allow underscore credentials, and that's going to be equal to true, and allow underscore methods, that is going to be equal to or, so we'll put a star there, and allow headers is also going to be or. So allow methods and allow headers as such. Brilliant. So that's just the beginning of our application starting to take form. Over here we have a /, and that's all. / just returns hello world. Well, I'm actually going to make that /health, and I'm going to call this check_health as follows. So there we go. We've got check health. I'm going to remove this print Sean over here, and the response here will be healthy. And let's just call this here check health. Now between any endpoints, which this here is an API endpoint, we've now updated and created, I just like to put double spaces here. This helps me to separate things in the code, and that looks better to me. Perfect. Let's go over to our internet over here, and I'm just going to minimize this a bit so we can see it alongside the code. And right now, if I hit enter, you'll see it just says not found. And that's because I've removed this here. If I go back there, now it says healthy because it recognizes the / as the main domain. So now if I put health and I don't have /health, it can't find anything. So here we go, /health. Now I'd like to show you something really cool about Fast API and the documentation. So we will do that in the very next video. Let's maximize our browser a bit here. And instead of /health now, I'm going to put /docs. And you'll see here that using Swagger, Fast API provides us with built-in documentation. So I can now click on this health here, /health, and you can see that this is a get endpoint. In other words, we're just retrieving or requesting data here. And you can see that I have a button here that says try it out. So if I click on try it out and click on execute, it returns the message healthy. Now I could see that in my browser anyway, but the point is we can test our endpoints out using the documentation here that's provided to us from Fast API. I don't have to write any API documentation. This is one of the things I love about the basic brass tacks setup of Fast API. Now, for example, I could add another endpoint here, and instead of health, we'll call this, I don't know, wealth, why not? And here we'll call this check wealth. And this will return as wealthy. And so if I go back here to my documentation and just refresh that, I can minimize that and now also have a endpoint for wealth, and I can go and execute that as such. Now we don't need this wealthy checkpoint. I wish it was a wealthy checkpoint and that it would enable us to just magically print money. But what I do need to do is add in our main endpoint, which is actually going to be a post endpoint. And that is because we are going to be sending a post request from our React application. It will be sending an audio file with data to an endpoint, and therefore we will need an app.post endpoint over here. So this will be post bot response. And this here I'm going to say is note, and this is important because you're going to wonder why I'm putting this, but I'm going to tell you not playing in browser when using post request. What I mean by this is eventually we're going to return an audio file. And when I do it as a post request, it won't play in the browser. It will only play when it sends it back to my React application. It will not play in the Fast API documentation. I don't know why that is. I've tried to find a solution for it, but I can show it to you working when we use a GET request. So you will see me moving between post and GET. whilst we're developing and building this out. Now, I know that might sound confusing, but go with me for now. As we get into it, you'll see exactly what I mean, and it will make complete sense to you. So now what I'm going to do here is say app.post. We're going to have in our post request /post-audio as follows, just like that, and also with a / on the end. Putting the forward slashes in the right places is important. If you get it wrong, it will not work. And then here, what we need is async def, as we're doing a method here, post_audio, and open and close parentheses. The file here is going to be upload file. That's what we're going to be sending into this post audio. And the type of that is going to be a file with some contents in it, like follows. Now, don't worry too much about the syntax if this isn't making sense. This is the standard way to actually go and send a file into Fast API on the backend, right? This is how it will receive the file that we're going to eventually send from our React application. Excellent. And then down here, I'm just going to print hello, just something really basic over there. Now, if I go over here to my application and I refresh this, you'll see I now have a post endpoint here, which is called post audio. And if I go to try it out, you'll see here it says I need to select files. I need to actually upload a file to send to it for it to go and test. Now, we're going to come back to this a little bit later, because what I want to do is write my logic in a get function. And then later on, when we go and connect it to our front end, we will send the file in, etc. I just want to show it to you that this is how you can receive an actual file that can be sent from your front end to your back end. So for now, I'm just going to close that as follows and get rid of it basically. And in the meantime, you can see here that if I refresh this, my documentation is now back to health. So a little bit more on that later. Let's keep pressing on. Right now, we don't actually have a React application to send our voice file over to the backend. So for making development faster and easier to work with for the time being, we're just going to upload our own file. So what I'd like you to do is actually record your own voice, but only for a few seconds, because we don't want to use up tokens on the API with either ChatGPT or with 11 Labs unnecessarily. I'm going to use onlinevoicerecorder.com because it's just very easy to use it and to work with this. And I'm just going to record a very brief statement. Hi, this is Sean. What's your name? And how are you today? And that is enough. That's all that is needed. And I did a test one earlier. I'm now just going to go and save that file like such. Now, what I can do is go and show in my Finder, and you can't see it because it's on my other screen, but I'm going to go and drag the file I just downloaded into my application here, and I'm going to rename it here as Sean Voice, or we could just call it Voice. So let's just rename that here as voice.mp3. Now, if I go and hit play, hi, this is Sean. What's your name? And how are you today? Sorry if that was a little bit odd. It's quite weird hearing my own voice back like that, but nonetheless, it's a bit of fun. So just whatever way you can, however you want to do it, just go and record a very short statement or very short snippet of your voice. Time to go and create our first backend function. Just go right click on functions, new file, and we're going to call this OpenAI _requests.py. And this will be where any calls we make to OpenAI are performed. We give that a little bit of room here. And first thing we're going to do is import OpenAI over here. And we're also going to say from decouple, import config like such. And then what I want to do is retrieve our environment variables like follows. And so to do that, we'll say OpenAI, and that'll be .organization is equal to config. And we called it in our .env open_AI_org. So that gives us there the organization and gets that all synced up with the OpenAI Python library. And then here we'll say OpenAI.api key. That is going to be equal to the same thing, except it's not going to be OpenAI org. It's going to be OpenAI key on the end here as such. So that will go and initiate our client here for OpenAI. And then what we want to do is convert our audio to text. So I'm just going to make some space here. And so we're going to create a function here, which will be with OpenAI Whisper. So we're going to use the Whisper part of the OpenAI API. And here, this is going to convert audio to text like such. And so here we'll just say def convert audio to text. does what it says on the tin. And so what we'll do is pass in an audio file. Now we've downloaded our audio file here. So we're going to test this and make sure it's working in a moment. But for now, let's just pass in audio file and write the function, and then we will come over and test it shortly. So what we're going to do here is go try, and in our function here, we'll say transcript is going to be equal to OpenAI dot audio, like follows, dot transcribe, and we're going to use, so open and close parentheses, we're going to use the Whisper API, and that's whisper-1, like follows, and audio file. So whisper1, audio file like such. And then here we're going to say message underscore text is going to be equal to what the transcript returned, and we're going to break into the text object. So it will return a text object to us, and then we can return that message text as follows. Now, if that didn't work, which is where we'll have our except, and we'll say exception as E, what we'll do here is just print that exception, that error, and return nothing. Great. So that is what we're doing over here now. Now, if you go over to OpenAI on platform.openai.com, you will see here there is all sorts of documentation on how to actually get this working. So if you're wondering, how did I actually know to do this? You can just go down here to audio, and it gives it to you. It tells you if you're doing a request, let's say you're using Rust or something, you're not using a built-in library in Rust, or using some other programming language, you could do it like this. Otherwise, you can just use the actual Python library, which is what we're doing. So if I go down here, and rather than curl, I select, for example, Python, you can see it actually tells me what code to use. So here you can see openai.audio.translate. The documentation is actually very, very good. Now, we're going through this course together, so we don't need to read all the documentation. I've done all of that for you, which is what we're going to continue on doing here. But it is worth you going and looking at the OpenAI documentation in case you have some other ideas on what you might want to develop. Now, what we're going to do here on the main.py file is actually go and import that. So here we're going to say from functions dot OpenAI requests import, and it was convert audio to text like such. Brilliant. And then if we scroll down here to our actual main function over here, which was a post endpoint, and it will end up being a post endpoint, is actually now going to be a get endpoint. So what I'm going to do here is just say, the same thing here. This is going to be instead of app.post, it's going to be get post audio like such. And here I'm even going to put -get to stop me from making mistakes later on. But we're going to build everything as a get function, because right now I'm not sending any data to this. And then later on, we will convert this to a post request. So here I'm going to just say get audio like such. And this will be get audio. And we need to now test our actual function. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say, so here, get saved audio as follows. And that's going to be as simple as just saying audio input, which will be equal to open. And what are we opening? Well, we're opening voice.mp3, because that's the file I saved over here. So we're going to open that as our audio input, and that will be our audio file, and that will be read. So this is going to be in speech marks there, R for read. And then what we're going to do is copy our function that we've just brought in, so convert audio to text over here. And we're going to say decode audio, and this will be message decoded, which will be equal to convert audio to text, and there we will pass in audio input as such. Now, let's actually check and see that's all working. So here I'm going to go print and message decoded as follows. We can get rid of this hello sign here. And in fact, what we can do here is just return done like such. Oh, instead of having read as well, I want this to be RB for, I think that stands for bytes, so read bytes. And that is what I want audio input to be. So audio input should then pass into this convert audio to text. That will then go and run this function we created. So it will pass that here, send it over to the API. Then OpenAI will actually go and send us back the text. So then open up your docs over here. Make sure you've got post audio get there, nice and ready. So just refresh the page, make sure it's there, and go to try it out, execute. And if it's running like this, that's a really good sign. Let me scroll down, response body done. And let's see here. Now we didn't return any text here, we just returned done, which is what that says. But if I look at what we printed out here on the server, it says, hi, this is Sean, what's your name? And how are you today? Fantastic, it worked. And by the way, you can actually put this in a different language. You can put it in Spanish or Chinese or any language you want. Go and try it out. And I'm telling you, ChatGPT will be able to work out what you're saying and send it back. Now, I actually spell my name S-H-A-U-N, but there's no way it would have known that. So that's very, very exciting. So far, it's working. Now, if this hasn't worked for you, there'll be one of three reasons I can think of. The first thing to do is to troubleshoot your code. Just print out the error that it's giving you. If you can't work it out, if something's off, check again. You've got an MP3 file being imported, etc. Read the error and understand it. Don't expect that somebody else is going to spend hours trying to debug your code. If you can't work it out, go and download the code and follow the instructions I gave you in the introduction section. actually walk you through how to download the working set of code and make sure that your code is the same, or try and run that working set. Then that'll help you get to where you might have worked things differently or done things differently, and therefore you can debug and see where the code's gone wrong. So that's one thing. It's probably more likely that either you don't have a free trial or you've used up a free trial and you haven't set up billing. So what you can do in that case is just go to platform.openai.com and go to your account and make sure that you've set up billing. With OpenAI, it's pay as you go. And it's, compared to other AI solutions out there, it's an incredible solution, and it's very, very low cost compared to other solutions. So I don't know if you have a free trial or not, because OpenAI might change their terms by the time this course even comes out. I am on a billing plan. So I'm running this query now for you doing this course, and I've taken a cut on that. A little bit has come out of my budget allowance, and I'll be charged for that by OpenAI, but it's very, very inexpensive. And of course, I'm absolutely fine to do that for you as a student going through this course, because I really believe in what we're doing. Now, that could be the second reason. And the third reason could potentially be to do with your file. Just make sure you've got a good clean MP3 file. It's not too large. You've saved it in the right folder, etc. But nonetheless, it should tell you. You can print out everything at each stage to see where is it breaking, what is it doing. So I really hope this is working for you so far. If it is, fantastic. I hope you're as excited as I am. Let's press on. Have a look at the documentation here on platform.openai.com/docs guides chat introduction. And when I go there, the fastest way to get there, by the way, is just to click on the chat completion here. So go to chat completion and introduction. And we're using right now ChatGPT or GPT 3.5 Turbo. This is essentially ChatGPT. I'm actually right now waiting on a license to use the GPT-4 API. And maybe even when you're doing this course, they're on a later version, which would be amazing. But right now, you should have access to GPT-3.5-Turbo. And it gives you the structure of making a call or a request to ChatGPT. So essentially what we're going to do is make a call to openai.chatcompletion.create. And we need to pass in the messages. So the first thing is to tell the system what it is. It says here, you are a helpful assistant. We could say you are a salesperson, you are a Spanish teacher, you are whatever we want it to be. And if you read the documentation, it says you can either have system, user, or assistant. Now, we'll be the user, so any messages we send, we will classify as user, and the assistant will be any messages that ChatGPT sent back to us. And so we will build up in a database our log of messages between ChatGPT and ourselves. So that's what we're going to do. And so that conversation can build as much as it needs to. Now, in terms of database, you have some options, right? So if you're used to working with database architecture, you can go and set up a database. I recommend Superbase. I love it. It's a fantastic database set. But we're just going to use a JSON file. We're going to do this all locally so that you can very quickly and easily debug and see what's actually going on with your conversation. So to do that, let's go over to functions here, and we're going to create a new file and call this database.py, like such. And within database.py, we're going to actually go and set up a get recent messages function. And so this is going to essentially build whatever conversation we want to go and feed into ChatGPT as being the latest conversation. That's what get messages is actually going to do. So to do that, what we're going to do is import JSON, and we're also going to import random. I'll show you what we'll use that for. And here we're going to say get recent messages as follows, and this will just be a function. So def get underscore recent underscore messages, like such. Open and close parentheses. And what do we need to do there? Well, the first thing I want to do is define the file name and learn instruction. The learn instruction is going to be exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be what we feed into ChatGPT to say, hey, here's what you are. Here's your role as the system role. So what do we need to do here? Well, what I'm going to do on backend is create a new file here, and I'm going to go new file, and we're going to call that stored underscore data.json. And this will be our database. It'll be a JSON file. Now, right now, there's nothing in there, which is absolutely fine. So what we're going to say is our file underscore name is going to be equal to as follows: stored underscore data.json, just like we've saved it over there. And our learn underscore instruction is going to be equal to the following dictionary. First of all, we're going to have a role, and that role is going to be system, just like we just looked at on the documentation. And content is going to be as follows. We can make this chatbot Rachel anything we want here. Spanish teacher, Chinese teacher, salesperson, marketing expert, interviewer could even be an interesting one. Let's go with interviewer. And I was in two minds to do this or salesperson right now, but let's do interviewer. Let's say you are interviewing me or the user for a job as a retail assistant. Ask short questions that are relevant to the position, to the junior, we'll say, junior position, right? And so that will be our instruction as the system to frame in ChatGPT's, let's call it mind, what it's actually there for. Now to add to this, what I'm also going to say is your name is Rachel. The user is called Sean. Keep your answers to under 30 words. Right? So this is where you can really start confining the AI, trying to tell it what exactly you expect from it. And this is really now your prompt engineering. So here we've done some prompt engineering around our learn instruction. And then we're going to go down here and initialize what we will call messages. So here we will say our messages, which is what we want to feed eventually into ChatGPT, is going to be an empty list for now. And here we're going to add a random element, right? Add a random element. And you don't have to do this. This is something which I want to do because it will make your prompt engineering that bit more interesting, right? It will really add a wow factor to whoever's using this application you're building. It'll make them go, wow, this thing sometimes does this and it does it randomly, or you'll see what I mean. First of all, let's create a random number. We'll say x is equal to random.uniform and between 0 and 1. So create a number between 0 and 1. And then what I'm going to say is, let's make it a 20% chance that ChatGPT will add some humor, or let's make it a 50% chance just while we're testing. So we'll say if x is under 0.5, then we're going to say learn instruction content, which is this bit here. So we're now breaking into this content, is going to be equal to, well, it's going to be equal to itself, plus it's going to be equal to some additional text. And notice I'm putting a space here because we ended with a full stop over there. So here I'm putting a space. And we're going to say your response will include some light humor, or let's say some dry humor, to make it quite fun to actually develop this thing. And this is where I get a lot of joy, by the way. I've made ChatGPT very sarcastic, and I'm not even going to tell you some of the things it said to my family, but it was hilarious. We were all crying with laughter. But nonetheless, let's continue here. Else, what we're going to do is we're going to say to it to do something else here. And if it's less than 0.5, so there's a 50% chance it'll have some humor. Let's say your response will include a rather challenging question, because this is an interview. And that is pretty good there. So in terms of as far as prompt engineering goes, you can really experiment with this as much as you want to. But I think this is a really, really good start for us. And so then what I want to do here is append instruction to message. So messages will then have appended, in other words, added to it, this learn instruction, which is now being built up here as such. Now you can imagine over time, until we go and reset the chat, messages are going to be getting stored here in this JSON file. We haven't built the application to do that yet, but that's essentially what's going to happen. So what we need to do is write a function that will actually go and get those messages and add them to the history here, so that we're not just feeding this element here, this instruction, but we're then feeding all the subsequent messages that happen afterwards, just like the documentation is doing here. We want to have this get ready. This will always be the same, but it might change occasionally with that random variable we put in, but then user and assistant and user and assistant, etc. We want to build that up over time. And so to do that, what I'm going to do here is say get last messages. And to do that, I'm going to say try, and we will have a exception as E, like follows. And right now there I'm going to just put pass, and within the try I'm going to say with open. So we're going to open the file name, which is our JSON file, and we'll call that as user underscore file. So user like that underscore file. We are going to say data is going to be equal to json.load the user file. So we're basically opening this JSON file here as such. And then I'm just going to feed it in the last 5 rows of data. You could, for example, have it load everything in if you want to, but I'd like to keep it fairly short so that it's thinking about the recent context, not all the context. So here I'm going to append the last 5 rows or items. I'll call it items of data. So here we'll say if data, and if the length of the data is less than 5, like such, we'll say messages dot append, and then we're going to append the item. And so what is that item over here? Well, we haven't put that in yet. So here we need to say for item in data. Right, so we need to loop through all of the items in that JSON file. And if that file's length is less than 5, then we're going to go and append that item in. Else, what are we going to do? Well, else we'll say here, we want to go for item in data, and this is going to be like such for item in data, but now we're going to say starting from the 5 most recent ones, right? So this will be from the most recent. We will do messages.append this item. So what is this doing? Right, if our data gets returned and the data length is less than 5, we're just going to append everything. Otherwise, we're going to go 5 steps back from the end of our data and essentially append the last 5 items of data here in stored JSON, 5 conversation items. Now you could make this 10, you could make it 20, you could make it all of them, so you could just remove this else if you want to. But for now, for consistency, let's just continue like this. And then here with this exception here, I'm just going to print E. So that will just print an error if an error occurs. And then finally, what we want to do is return our messages. So here we're going to say return messages like such. Now let me just check the indentation here. Here I've got messages there, and yep, this needs to go like such. Let me bring this all back like there, and there we go. That looks to be the correct indentation. So I'm just checking this here. For some reason, my VS Code has indented everything a little bit too much. So I'm just going to bring it all back here in line with where it should be. And there you go. My indentation is now much more consistent. So I'm not sure why it's doing that. So that's one of the things that can always go wrong with Python is the indentation. It's actually one of the things I really don't like about Python personally. Everyone has their own opinion on that, but there we go. Just make sure your indentation is correct. Now our next function will actually be to go and call ChatGPT and get its response. So I'm very excited for that. I'll see you in the next one. Time to get our response from ChatGPT. This is obviously going to be a very exciting part of this course for you, I hope, because it was very exciting for me to go and get this built. So in the OpenAI_requests file here, where we have convert audio to text, we're going to create another function here, which is also going to be OpenAI, and this is going to be ChatGPT, and this is where we're going to get response to our message as follows. And so the function here will be def, it will be get chat response, and we're going to pass into that the message input, which will be our message that we decoded earlier on. And then what we're going to do here is say messages is going to be equal to get recent messages. Now, what is this get recent messages? Well, it comes from our database here, get recent messages. So what we want to do up here is we want to import that. So here we're going to say import custom functions, and we're going to say from database import get recent messages like such. And in fact, that is functions.database like follows. Brilliant. So now we've got that there. So that will go get the recent messages, which we just constructed in the last session, which is our prompt engineering plus any conversation we've had with ChatGPT before, which will get stored in this stored_JSON. And now that we have those, we can say our user message, so this will be the latest message, is going to be equal to here, our role. And our role here is that of user. And our content is going to be that of, what is our content? Well, it's the message input that we just decoded from our audio file. So we're going to decode that audio file, which we've already done, and pass it into this function, that decoded text. And that will be our latest message here to ChatGPT. And so then we're going to take our messages and we're going to append our user message as follows. So at the very start of the conversation, if we go to our database, the very first message that'll get sent will be this one here that has the role and the content, right? So role and content, the role will be the system role. And then that'll get passed in, and our question or answer or whatever we say to it will be then appended to that. And then eventually what will happen is we'll have lots of messages, and this will get appended to the start of that, plus all the other messages subsequent to that. And then our most recent message again laid on top of all those messages. Hope it's making sense. So now let's go here to print messages, because that'll help you with debugging to understand what's going on. And now we're going to go and call OpenAI. I'm just going to push this indentation back one here, because for whatever reason, it's indenting too much. And here I'm going to say try, and that's going to be our response, which we'll get from ChatGPT. It'll be OpenAI.chat completion.create like follows. And in that, we'll say our model, and this is going to be where you can have a bit of fun, but it's going to be GPT-3.5-turbo. Now, you might even be able to do this by the time you actually code this up with GPT-4. And you need to make sure you are actually able to access GPT-4. Right now, there's an application process for that. But I'm going to be using GPT 3.5-turbo. You can use any GPT model here as long as you have access to it. Brilliant. And then after that here, I'm going to say the messages is going to be equal to messages, which is now this whole role, user, content, etc. And what I want to do here is print the response as follows. And our message text, so message underscore text, is going to be response. And here we're going to put choices, because we get an object from ChatGPT we can break into. It'll be the first item, and it'll be message that we need to cut into, and the message content. So this will be essentially the message we get back from ChatGPT. And here we will return that message text as follows. Right, let's go exception as E, as follows. And if there is an error, we will print that error out like such. And finally, once we print that out as well, we can now hit return. Great, let's actually go and test this out. So if we go back to our main.py over here, and we can get rid of this message decoded because we know that's working. And actually, let's just add a guard here to ensure message decoded. So in case the message wasn't decoded for whatever reason, we'll say if not message decoded as follows. Then let's just return that there was an error, right? So we'll put HTTP exception, and that'll have a status code of 400 or something. And then we'll say detail will be as follows. It will be failed to decode audio. So that'll just catch if there is some kind of error here decoding the audio. And now what we want to do is actually go and get our chat response. So here we'll say get chat GPT response like follows. And so we need to import that in. We need to say get chat response. We need to import that from our OpenAI requests file there. And that's how we're going to do it here. So let's get that chat response. So that'll be chat underscore response is going to be equal to get chat response and passing in message decoded, which is the string we got before. Then we will return done. But before that, let's actually go and print our chat response, which is the message that ChatGPT will send back to us. Great. Let's go over here to our internet. Let's go and run this again, try it out, execute, and we should see, there we go. Brilliant, that's just got fed in. And it says, hi Sean, I'm Rachel, I'm doing well, thank you for asking. Shall we get started with the interview? Fantastic, that's so exciting. I love seeing AI at work. I feel like I can now actually have a conversation with this large language model. So if we just scroll up, we can see what we printed out. Right, so this is what we sent in. We sent role, system, content. You are interviewing the user for a job as a retail assistant, are short questions, etc. Your name is Rachel. My name is Sean. Keep your answers to less than 30 words. Your response will include some dry humor. So interestingly enough, that's what actually ended up getting added there. And there was no dry humor here. I'm not sure why, but I'm sure we'll see some of that get added in depending on how ChatGPT feels. Probably they didn't feel that was the right time to inject it in. I'm not sure. It's very exciting. Let's go and see how this plays out. Now that we've got a response, we need to go and store that in our database so that this conversation builds up over time. That's what I'd like to go and do. And actually what I'm going to do over here is rather than printing out our response now, I don't really need to print that out. I'm just going to print our messages so I can see that those are actually building up. And so over at our database tab where we've got get recent messages, we can also now create a function here, which will be store messages. And this is what will act as our database. We can go df store underscore messages. And right now I'll just write pass. And in the very next video, we'll go and get that set up. Right, let's save our messages for retrieval later on. So I can get rid of this pass now under store messages. And let's just say define the file name. And this will be file underscore name again. That'll be equal to stored data.json, which is acting as our database. And here we're going to get recent messages, which will be messages, messages equals get recent messages as follows. And what do I want to get from that? Well, I want to exclude the first message up here. I want to exclude this first one that's added in the list at the very, very beginning. So here what I'm going to do is put a 1 and then say, give me everything from that onwards. And that's not messaged, that's messages, like follows. Great. And then here, let's go add messages to data. So our user message underscore message is going to be equal to role. So by now you're used to doing this, and that's user. And the content is going to be the message that they sent as an input, right? So what the user actually sent with their audio file. And let's just call that our request message. You call it message input, I'll call it request message. And the response message will be the one from ChatGPT. So here's my message, that's the one back from ChatGPT. So we'll add my message in there, great. And then the assistant message, which we'll just change this to be assistant, like follows. The role here will be assistant, and the content will be response message. I'm getting my message and their message as follows. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying messages.append like such. and this will be the user message. And then I'm also going to append the assistant message because that's the most recent one. So that's the one that got sent back. So it's the most recent item in the conversation. Now, why am I excluding the first item, which is this message up here, right? The one where we actually go and do some of the prompt engineering. Well, the reason for that is because it's getting added on in the beginning every time. It's getting included every single time on the message every time get recent messages gets called. So I don't want it to keep adding up and double counting in there. So that's why I'm excluding it here, because it's already then getting added back in when the user makes a request. So then here what we're going to do is save the updated file. So here we'll say with open, and then that's file name. And this here is a write. We're going to write here as file, and then json.dump the messages that we've just constructed there for the file. So that's going to go and save that JSON file like we want it to. Great. That is pretty much our messages stored. There's nothing else we need to do with that. But if you think about it through testing and also for the user, we also need to reset our messages as well. So we want, at some point, this is going to add up full of messages, and I'm going to want to reset those. Now let's just go and see what that could look like. So here I'm going to go and execute or refresh this again and just go and execute and have Rachel respond to me. So let's go and do that again. There it is. Hi Sean, I'm Rachel. Tell me about, previous retail experience you've had. I love this. I get so excited by this. But now if I go to my stored JSON, nothing's happened. Now, why has nothing happened? Well, why it's done that is because we've forgotten to actually go and call that. So here, what we need to do is store messages. Here we need to import our store messages from our database. So here I'm going to go from functions.database import store messages. And down here, what we're going to do is go and store those messages. So here, store messages. And in there, we're going to pass in our message decoded. And that is our message that we sent to ChatGPT, and the chat response, which is ChatGPT's response, into that function. Brilliant. Let's go ahead and try that again now. So here, I'm going to go and refresh this, try it out, and execute. And there you go. That has been sent. I'm doing excellent. Thanks for asking. So let's get started. Are you comfortable working long hours on your feet? So this is some of the dry humor coming out here from Rachel, and I absolutely love it. I get excited. I know I say this, but I get excited every time I see it. It's so fun interacting with AI. But let's go and have a look here at our stored data JSON. Here you can see the conversation has been saved. And so if I was to go and execute this again, it's just going to send the same message to Rachel again, because right now it's just an audio file. I'm not actually speaking and giving new audio to Rachel. But you'll be able to see that actually now this file is getting longer. It's getting appended. So what I want to do here is make sure that we actually have the ability to reset our messages. So here I'm going to reset messages. And that's going to be a function here in our database.py file, which is reset messages, like follows. And that's a very easy bit of code here. So we're just going to do open here, and it'll be the file name, which is stored data.json, like such. And this is a write file, right? So that's going to be literally it. It's just going to overwrite that. So overwrite current file with nothing. And that's brilliant. I don't need to call that right now, but it'll become relevant later on when we want to call our API to go and reset the messages. And so to do that, we can go to main over here, and where we've got store messages, we can also put reset messages like such. And then underneath health, so where we have our health check, let's copy that, create some space, and let's call this reset messages, which here we will just call that reset. And instead of check health, it'll be reset something like underscore conversation, like such. And then we're going to call our reset messages function. And that should go and clear our database. And then we're going to return conversation reset, like follows. Now, right now we've got a conversation stored there. So let's check that's working. Let's go over here. And where we've got reset, go try it out, execute. It says conversation reset. If I go back to my database, you'll see it's empty. Fantastic. So far, we are able to take a voice file, an audio file, convert it into text with ChatGPT, put it into a whole conversation with ChatGPT, and have a response from ChatGPT. But now we get to the point where we're going to be using 11 Labs, because from what I've seen so far, 11 Labs is unbeatable when it comes to getting human-sounding voices back. And so they do have a free trial right now, which we've covered earlier, but I actually have a paid version with them at the moment as well. So you can go to api.11labs.io and /docs. So you can just go here, and you'll see that this looks just like our own fast API documentation. So they're using Swagger here as well. and probably OpenAI or Fast API, I should say, on the back end, not OpenAI, I meant to say Fast API. And so here we have all of the API endpoints we can get from them. And so one of the voices I really like is Rachel's voice, but there's lots you can get. So here, if I go to try it out under Get Voices, I can hit Execute and see all of the voices that 11 Labs allows us to go and use. And here are the voice IDs. Rachel's is the one that ends in WAM, so it's nice and easy to remember. And I really like her accent. I think it's really super cool. And then we also have other voice IDs. Now, you can even clone other people's voices as long as you have their permission, or your own voice with 11 Labs. I've tried it with my voice. I didn't give it much data, and it made me sound quite American. I'm actually originally from South Africa, so it gave me a bit of an American twang, which I thought was quite fun. And I've worked a lot with folk in the States as well, so it kind of felt like that's what I would be like if I lived in the States. I would have that American accent. But nonetheless, that was a bit of fun. And I ended up settling on Rachel, but you can come here and choose any voice ID that you want, right? So you can use any one you want. I'm going to stick with Rachel, but this is where you can come and explore the voices and their actual IDs here. Now, if you have your API key ready, which you should, because it should be in your environment variable file, you can actually go and create some of your own speech, for example. So I could go to this text-to-speech voice ID. You could go and put in your ID here. So your API key, I should say here, your voice ID there, and any message you want. Hello, my name is, what's yours? And it will send back a file for you. So then you can just go to execute, and it will send back a file for you with their voice saying that sentence, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to do it here because we're going to do it through the API. We are hardcore and advanced, so we're going to go and do that. But please, I do encourage you to go to the 11 Labs API documentation. It's fantastic, and it's a lot of fun to play with. Okay, you twisted my arm. I'll do one for you now. So I've just put in my API key up at the top there, and I'm going to say, this is so much fun. Let us create a sales chatbot. And let's go and execute that. Great, that seems to have been successful. Let's go and play what that sounds like.
This is so much fun. Let us create a sales chatbot. This is so much fun. Let us create a sales chatbot.
That is awesome. So as you can see, you can have a lot of fun playing around with this. It's time to write our function to convert ChatGPT's response into a human voice with 11 Labs. Let's get into it. So the first thing that we're going to want to do with this is to create a new file here in functions, and this will be called text_to_speech, like follows, .py. And what are we going to do here? Well, first thing we're going to do is import requests, because we're going to make a request to 11 Labs API. And here we're going to say from decouple, as you guessed it, import config. And what I want to do beneath these two imports here is grab the 11_labs_API_key, which we have saved in our environment variables file. So that is going to be equal to config as follows. And then what we want to do is grab that and in speech marks with the 11 Labs API key that it'll go and grab there. So this is with 11 Labs. And here we're going to convert text to speech like such. And then here we'll say def convert text to speech, open and close parentheses. Now, what are we going to convert? Well, the message from ChatGPT. So we'll pass that in here, and our body will be equal to this as follows. We'll have our text, and let's just indent this like I want it here. So there we go. So text, and that will be our message. And what else are we going to send to them? Well, we need to send our voice settings. So voice_settings as follows. And what our voice settings going to be? Well, we're going to set those here. First of all, we're going to have the voice stability here, which I'm just going to set as 0. You can play around with this. You can make it, 0.5, 50, whatever they allow you to do, which we'll go and have a look at in a minute. And then here, what I want to do is change this to similarity boost. Right, so here we go. That is our body. And then in terms of our voice ID, we're going to call it voice. I'm using Rachel, so I'm going to call it voice Rachel, but you can create a list of voices if you want to. And so let's go and get our Rachel voice ID. So we go to get voices from what I showed you in the last video, hit execute. Here's Rachel's. It's this one here that is WAM. And we're going to go and paste that in here as follows. Great. Now that we've got our Rachel voice, what we need to do is figure out what is the correct API to actually go and call. And so the one that we're going to be using is the text to speech one. It's this one, V1 text to speech with the voice ID. So we'll give it the voice ID, we'll send it our API key, but notice here we need to send in the text, which will be our message. So that's what we've done over here. We've got our text, which is our message, and our voice settings, stability 0, similarity boost, here again, is 0. Now you can play around with these. I can't quite remember what the values can be, but if you play around with it on 11 Labs website, you can see what the values are there too, or even just play around with it here in the actual API docs. I've got pretty good results with these just being 0, so I'm going to continue with it like that. Great. So that's our voice here, Rachel, that we're going to get. And so what I want to do now is create my headers. So here we're going to define voice. This here was define data or body, because that's what we're going to be sending in our request. And then over here, what I want to do is I want to say headers are going to be equal to the following. So I want to say my xi-api-key, because that's what the documentation calls it, xi API key in the headers, is something I want to pass through. And what is that going to be? Well, that's going to be our 11 Labs API key like such. I also want to post or send my content-type like such, content-type, and that is going to be application. In fact, that's a lower a, not capital, lower a application /JSON like such. Excellent. So that is part of our headers there. And the other thing that is very easy to miss that we don't want to forget is also to pass through our accept here. What format do we want to accept back? Well, we want to accept back audio /mpeg like follows. Okay, great. That's looking pretty good to me. So that's our headers over there. Now what we need to do is construct our URL, so our API endpoint. So we'll do that by saying endpoint, and that is going to be equal to an F string. And what we want to do there is now put in the 11 Labs API here as follows. So here it's going to be 11labs.api.io. So I can just copy that here and paste it in there. /v1 /text-2-speech. I'm just copying everything from here, right? v1 text to speech. And then we want to put in our voice ID. So here we'll put / and it's voice Rachel that we're passing in over here. Right, so that's what we're going to send. We're going to send it with those headers over here. So here we are constructing endpoint, or we'll say headers and endpoint as follows. Great. Now we can actually go and fire off our request. So we can say try, or sorry, here's send request. And then here we can say try, and we will have an exception as E as usual, where we will just return nothing if there's nothing there. And in our try, we'll say our response is equal to requests, which is the Python library we imported. And this is a post request. We know it's a post request because it says post here, and we're sending data. So this here is a post request endpoint like follows. And JSON is going to be equal to the body. And the headers are going to be equal to the headers. So the JSON is essentially this here, the request body. That's what we're sending from the request library, and the headers are going to include this and everything else that I told you we needed for this to actually work successfully. Great. And then what we're going to do is here we're going to say handle response, and we're going to say if response dot status code is equal to 200 like such, then return the response dot content. And that is what will actually go and return the audio file we wanted. Otherwise, again, else, just return nothing. That's how we're going to manage converting our text to speech. Now let's actually go and import this in main. So let's go to main here, and we'll say from functions dot text to speech import convert text to speech like such. And if we scroll down here to where we had our handle exception before, let's copy that and do the same thing here if there's no chat response. So here we'll say if not chat response, fail to get chat response. So we'll just handle that just as we did before. And once we've got that chat response, we can now store our messages, which we've already done. And we can go and perform the following here. We can convert chat response to audio. And we'll do that by going audio output like such, convert text to speech. We're passing in the chat response, so we know we've got it, because otherwise we would have returned an error. And that's going to go and send the API to 11 Labs and get our human sounding voice back. And then I'm going to copy this guard statement again to make sure we actually get that. And I'm going to say if we don't get it, so if not audio output, fail to get 11 Labs audio response like such. And if this does fail, I will talk with you through the reasons why it might, but let's just crack on for now. So what I want to do to actually return this is I'm going to create a generator that yields chunks of data. And so this will be def iter file as follows. So here's a function, and this will yield audio output like such. Now that we've got that, we can return our audio file. So return audio file, and that will be return streaming response. And it's going to be our iter file over here as such. So that function we just created. So that's going to go and chunk our data for us. And that is with a media underscore type. Now let's go and try it out. Hit execute. And brilliant. Let's have a look here. We've got a play button and everything. Now let's hit play.
Hello, Sean. My name is Rachel, and I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. Can you give me an example of how you've dealt with an upset customer in the past?
Wow, brilliant. So we've actually been able to go get the response from Rachel here. Here you can see the data and the conversation history, etc. Get her response and convert it back to a human sounding voice. Now, what I'm going to do in the next video is talk you through, number one, troubleshooting in case you had issues, what those issues might have been and how to address them. Number two, how to actually improve upon the response from Rachel as well. And then finally, some of the tweaks and changes we now need to make to this file so that we can actually go and send data to this actual endpoint and send it back, not as an audio MPEG, but as what's known as an application octet stream. So we'll go and do that in the very next video. But well done for getting this far, and I'll see you next in the troubleshooting video. So far, you've done something really impressive. You've been able to get a human voice imported here as a file right now, convert it to text using AI, and then have a super state-of-the-art advanced AI have a conversation with you and return that audio file so that you can play it and hear it. Now, I say a conversation. Right now, it's not a conversation. Right now, we've just got one message being passed, and it's the same message we're always sending to Rachel. If I keep hitting execute, it's always going to be the same message getting passed. And right now, actually, what I'm going to do is just go and reset our conversation. So I'll just go and do that now. That's done. You can see a conversation reset. But it's still very, very, very good. What you've been able to do is fantastic because it means you can now interact with your backend using your front end. And I'm going to talk about some ways to troubleshoot this if it didn't work for you. So there's a number of reasons this might not have worked for you. The main reason is either you don't have access to a free trial with 11 Labs or you have exceeded your token allowance. So I had this happen to me. I exceeded my token allowance of, I think it was 10,000. And therefore I went on their $5 per a month plan. Right? So that gave me a ton more tokens to develop with. And that's probably the first reason. The second reason could be to do with code. So again, just go back to the resources, download the code, make sure that our code is exactly the same. Once you've done that, congratulations, because we can now move to this next step, because there's some changes we now need to make. Now, do you remember I said that we're going to change this to a GET request, and I printed all sorts of funny text below saying, this isn't playing in the browser when it's a POST request. Well, that's because if you do a POST request with an audio MPEG for whatever reason, it doesn't play in the browser. And I wanted you to be able to see, tangibly test and play with that file. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our GET request and convert it here now to what it was before. So this is now going to be POST audio. So it's going to be a POST request. And down here, what we're going to do is make this an async def POST audio file as we had before. So over here, there, async def post audio with the file that we will upload. So instead of just now doing audio input equals the same file every time, what we're actually going to do is write a little bit of code here that's going to be able to read the file that we pass in. So we're just gearing this up now so that we can connect this all with our front end and React. So let's just go and comment that out. You might want to use it again at some point. So we'll comment it out there for now. And here what we're going to do is say save file from front end. And what we're going to do that is we're going to say with open, and this is going to be file.filename as follows. And this is going to be WB. So I think that's write binary or as buffer. Maybe B is for buffer, not binary. I'm not sure. And then what we're going to do here is say buffer.write. And that's going to be file.file. And that file.file is going to be file.file read open and close parentheses. And then our audio input, so audio underscore input, is now going to be equal to open that file. So the file.file name, like such, and that's going to be read bytes or read buffer or read binary. I'm not quite sure what the B stands for. So there we go. So that's what we're going to do over here. We've now got our audio input that is going to actually come from this file here. And instead of returning audio MPEG at the bottom here, what we need to return is application, and that's going to be / octet stream. And that is what we're going to decode in our React front-end application. So those are just some changes we need to make. Now we can go and test that that is in fact working. And the way we're going to do that is by saving it, going to our docs, refreshing it, go to post audio, try it out, choose an audio file. So here I'm going to choose here in my downloads the voice that I recorded from before. So I'm going to go and open that. I can also just go and grab the same voice file that I saved here, right? Where I have voice, but it's the same file. So I'm just going to go and open that. And now I'm going to go execute. And what it should do is return an octet stream. So let's see that working. Looks to be working to me. If it's doing this, it means it's thinking, it's computing, it's working, it's doing something. And my internet, by the way, is quite slow right now because I've got videos uploading. So let's just go and see how that actually works. Brilliant. That has gone and run. You can see it's still run it. Hi, this is Sean. What's your name? How are you today? Etc. So that's really, really good. That actually went and did everything it was supposed to. And now I can even go and download that file. Now it's not going to download in a format that I can just go and play because it's come through as this octet stream over here. And if you want to see that it's actually, worked in terms of we got an answer from ChatGPT, what I can do is also here just print the chat response. So print chat response as such, and let me go and run that again, just so that you can see that chat response coming back from ChatGPT. And because we're just sending the same audio file, I could send a different one. ChatGPT is saying, Sean, I already introduced myself as Rachel earlier, but no worries, I'm doing great today. How about you? Can you tell me what experience you have working in retail? I think it's absolutely brilliant, by the way. I absolutely love that. I don't need to print that chat response anymore, so I'm going to get rid of that. You'll just have to trust me now that with this octet stream, that file is now being sent across. If you see it working here, you know that's working. And where you're really going to see that in action is now when we develop the front end and we interact with this API backend endpoint that you've now created with Fast API. Fantastic work. Congrats. I'll see you in the next one. It's time for us to go ahead and build out our front end application over here. Now we've got our back end up and running. We've tested it. Everything is working just fantastically well, but we need to be able to call this endpoint to send an audio file, have it decoded, and a new audio file sent back. And then we can just keep having that conversation and let the conversation build. So it's very, very exciting. Now, what we need to do is actually go and set up our controller component. That will be pretty much everything that wraps all the other components. And we'll start by doing that and adding this title component. So head over to Visual Studio Code. We can get rid of all of this on the main.py, just that old commented out text over there. So we'll get rid of that. Now we don't need main.py anymore. So I'm going to come out of that. So we're done with backend. You can see I've stopped my backend running. I'm going to add a new terminal now, and this will be my front end. So here, front end as follows. And what we're going to do now is actually work with our front end. So right now over there, we've got our index CSS, we've got our app.tsx. And so what we need to do is create a folder here. This will be our components folder. And within that, we're going to create a component here, which will be our controller.tsx. Now, if this is all very new to you and you have no idea what I'm talking about in terms of components, etc., go back and watch the bonus section. Just watch it, go through it, make sure you understand what's going on there. Because that bonus section, we actually just build a React app from scratch. And I go through all of this in, some would call it painstaking detail for you. I like to think of it as fun detail, but I take you through absolutely everything there so that you will be able to follow along here at the pace that we're actually going to run at. So what we need to do here is hit RFCE, and that should bring up our component as follows. If you're not sure what I just did, go back to the environment setup section, make sure you have the same plugins with snippets as I have. Otherwise, you'll have to just type this out manually. So great, we have our controller there. Now in app.tsx, what I'm going to do is go and import our controller component. And so that's imported here. And so what I'm going to do there is just bring that in as such. Brilliant. Now, what do we need to do? We've got our controller over here. Let's actually see that that's working. And so to do that, we're going to go yarn dev, let that build, and we need to go here to localhost port 5173. So I'm going to open up my internet browser here in Google Chrome. Make sure you're using Google Chrome, please. And let's go there now. So there we go. Great. We're on port 5173. And I'm actually just going to close this a bit so I can see my code. Let me bring that along here like such. I want to be able to see my code and see what we're building here at the same time. So that is perfect. Excellent. Now within our controller, we're going to have some functions here and also some state. So I'm going to put in here use state. I'm just going to get ahead of the game and import that. And then above where we return our JSX, or we return our component, I'm going to go and put in here some use state. So here I'm going to put const, and we're going to have an is loading state and a set is loading state as follows. And that's going to be equal to use state, and that's going to be defaulted as false. Again, if you're not sure what I did, just go and watch the React crash course section. And also for messages, I'm going to store my messages here as well. So we're going to have all the back and forth messages, and we're going to have set messages as follows, and that is going to be equal to use state. And now I want to make sure that React knows what type to expect. So I'm just going to put that there will be any objects as an array. So an any array, make sure you put the array and then the array again over here. So we'll deal with that later. And we're also going to need a function, which will be called create blob. So here const create blob URL, and that is going to be a function as follows. and it's going to take in a parameter, which we'll call data as any. And I'll explain more about what's going on here later on. We're not going to work with the function yet. I'm just creating some of the placeholders for it. And then here we're going to have handle stop. And what handle stop is going to do is when the person stops recording, that's going to trigger off the event to go and send that recording, to stop recording it, to go and send it to our backend. And again, we're not going to code that right now. I'm just putting the placeholder for it over here. So we're going to do that as follows. And make sure that you make this one an asynchronous function, because we're going to be using Axios when we go and do that later on. Now, down here in the return of controller, what I want to do is just make some space over here. I'm going to put another div tag for now. And I want to put a class name as follows. This is going to be a height of screen, because I want it to be the height of the screen. And I want the overflow on the y-axis to be hidden or scroll. Here I'm going to put hidden, and I'll show you why later on in a moment, but this is to do with the messages getting so long that I need to be able to scroll them. And I'm going to show you how we do that in the next div tag, because over here, we're going to have a div as well. And this is going to have a class name as follows. It's going to be a flex div. It's going to be a flex col, because I want everything to be stacked vertically. And then here, I'm going to justify between all the divs between this div here. And that's going to spread them out. So it's going to push them away from each other, because we're going to have a top section, a bottom section, and a middle section. And we can see that here on the wireframe, right? We've got this top section and the bottom section and the middle section. And what I want in this controller framework that we're building here is I want them to push away from each other. I want them to be spread equally. And this justify between is going to help me to do that. I'm also going to make the height full and the overflow y to be a scroll, right? And this is going to allow me to scroll the messages if the conversation gets really, really long. And I also don't want the conversation, when it does get really long, to get hidden behind here, because you can imagine we're going to have lots of conversation points and then they might get hidden underneath this. So I'm going to give this box some padding on the bottom so that it pushes them up to the point where the user can still see them. And so this padding bottom 96 is going to do just that for us. Great. Now, before we can actually go and make use of this div that I've added here, so what I'm going to do is just, so you can see it here, I'm going to call this placeholder. And that's where we're going to have this as a placeholder. So here you can see placeholder. There's nothing above it right now. But this is where we're going to bring in our title. So our title is going to be over here. And so now we're ready to go and import in our title component. We've set up the structure of the controller component, and now we can go and create our title and import it here. All right, so I've pasted in an image of what we're building here. Right? So we have our title section at the top, and then the messages here, and the footer section here. Because the wireframe is no longer good enough, I want to build to a prototype which is a little bit more colorful and in line with what we're trying to build. So let's go and create our title component here. I'm going to go title, let's try that again here, title.tsx, and then here create our title component. Now this component needs to pass into it as props these set messages. So over here where we're setting the messages, I need to pass that into the title. And the reason for that is we're going to refresh those messages here. We're going to reset them, reset the conversation, and make sure that that calls the API and resets everything, etc. And we're actually going to call that here from the actual title part. So you can see how this all works, and you can see it early on. So the first thing I want to do here then is bring in useState, because we're going to need that. And we're also going to need Axios, because that's how we're going to make our web request. So here I'm going to import Axios from Axios as follows. And then down here, I'm going to bring in my props. And so here I'm going to give them a type as follows, and set messages, which we know is a React function. It's a setter function. So set messages here, I'm going to just give it an any type just to keep things simple. And then in here, I'm going to pass that right here into props. And so now to actually see that connection happening, and just as a refresher in case someone hasn't gone through the React crash course or did React a long time ago, what we're going to do here is bring in our title component as follows. So this will be import title from title. And here we're going to bring in our title component as follows, like such. So when I go and do that, you'll see it brings up an error because it's expecting me to pass in something called set messages into this component. So right now, here's our controller component, and within it, we have this title component over here. And so what I'm going to do is pass in this set messages, just like it expects me to, and I'm going to pass it in as set messages. So this is getting passed here and being called set messages. Great, that's getting passed along just fine. And if I actually look at my application, you can see it says title, which is perfect. I could say hello for now, and that will then say hello. Brilliant. So that component has now imported in to our controller component. Now what I'm going to do is create a state here for is resetting. And that's similar to is loading. So here I'm going to say set is resetting, because when we send our request to reset everything, then I want to be able to see that that's happening. And here I'm going to say useState is going to be false as follows. And so nothing's being reset when this loads. That's why we're going to put that to false. And so here we're going to create the function for reset the conversation. And so here, const reset conversation will be equal to async. And then what I want to do here is go ahead and the set is resetting to true at the beginning of this. And then at the end of the function, I'll set it back to false like such. Great. And now we can make our Axios request to our backend. Now, right now, our backend is not running. So let's actually go and get that running. So I've got backend over here now. I'm not in the front end terminal anymore. I'm in the backend. And remember, we actually created here our UVcorn main app. So here I'm going to put UVcorn main app and just go and get that backend running. Now, actually, I'm not sourced here into my Python environment. So let me just do that as well. So source venv bin activate. And now I'm sourced in there. So I can try again to run UVcorn, and there we go. It's now running. Now you'll notice I didn't do the reload because I'm not developing anymore. The backend is built. We've tested it. Now I'm just working on the front end, so I can just run this as UVcorn main app. Great. Let's close our backend. Let's go back to our front end over here. Our backend is still running on the terminal, by the way. It's still there. And what I want to do here in title, I'm just going to close main.py down, is I can now call that backend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say await axios.get. And here we're going to get HTTP // after the colon, localhost, because this is on our own local environment, port 8000, which is what Fast API runs on, / reset. You remember we created that endpoint. If we go back to main.py here again, here's our reset endpoint. We're about to now go and call that. So I can close that down again. And after it does that, what I want to do is I want to just go then, and we're going to give it a result or a response. And it's going to be something along these lines here. We're going to say if the response.status is equal to 200, then we will say set messages to an empty list, because that means that the reset was successful. It deleted the data here in the stored JSON folder over here. And therefore we can reset our messages here in the controller where we've got set messages back to an empty list. So that's what is going to happen. So when a user clicks on the refresh, which we're going to build in, that is essentially what it's going to do. It's going to send this request. When the backend confirms it deleted it that side, then we're going to delete it here on the front end side. All right, great. Hope it's making sense. And then here we're going to catch the error, and we're going to console.error the error.message. And what I'm going to do here is do the same here. If for some reason this doesn't end up with a response status of 200, I'm going to console log error. There was an error with the API request to backend, something like that. Perfect. Right, so that there is our Axios call, and all of that should work when we go and make the request. But so far we haven't even got a button to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put button as a temporary button, and we're going to get rid of this and style it more in an upcoming session. But here I'm just going to go push me. Right, so this will be the button, or actually more intuitively, let's call it reset for now. And this here is our reset button. We can even give it a class name, background, indigo 500. And you can see that is now a button. We'll give it some padding as well, right? Just so that we can go and test it. Now, when we click that button, so on click, what it should do is go and reset the conversation. So it should destroy anything in the stored JSON file that's here on our backend, which you can see there is some data in there. If you don't have any data, you can enter anything in here that you want to enter in. That's absolutely fine. And what I'm going to do now is go here and try to reset that. So let's go and click that reset and see what happens. So let's widen this a bit and have a look here at our console. And on click reset conversation. So that should all be moving. That should be working. Let me say that again. Let me refresh this. Reset. And has it done anything? I'm getting no response back here. Let's go to network, reset. And we are getting a response saying conversation reset. If I go over here to stored JSON though, we can see there is still data here. Now I think that's because I'm actually in the file. So I'm going to close that file down. I won't save it, or in fact I will save it just so that you can see that's there. So I'll overwrite anything in there. Let's close that down. If I go back there, you can see all that text I just entered in is there, all that random text. Let's go back here again, refresh this. So we can see that that call is working. I could see it here on the network part. Right, let me show you that again. If I go and click refresh or reset, you can see here, I'm getting a response saying conversation reset. So that should have worked. And now if I look here, yes, it's gone. So the reason it wasn't working is because I was actually in the file, right? I had that tab open, I've closed it, and it has worked. You can see we've got that response, conversation reset. Brilliant. So this is the actual function code part. This is the JavaScript part, think of it as, or the TypeScript part of this component built. Now, in the next video, what I want to do is actually build out the user interface part. What's wonderful is we've already proven we can get our front end to talk here to our back end, which is still running, and I'm going to keep it running for now. And that's wonderful, but we are here to build the front end. Right now it doesn't look great. So let's actually get some of the look here polished up so that things actually flow and look like they should do. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to get rid of this button there now, and I'm just going to put here in this div a class name, because this is going to wrap our title. And it's going to be flex, and it's going to be a flex row, which is what it does by default. So I don't need to type flex row. And justify between. And remember now, because this is Tailwind, that justify between is basically going to push one div, which will be this refresh button, away from the name of the bot, which is going to be Rachel. So what I want to do is keep this as a flex, justify between, and that between is going to push them away from each other. I also want them to be the same height from the top and the bottom. So you'll see here they're nicely centered in this dark bar. And so that's what we're going to go and do over here. I'm going to say items center width full, and give it a padding of say 4 with a background gray of 900. And again, if this is all new, just check out the crash course part, because we go through all of this in more detail. And then what I'd like to do here is make the font bold and also give it a shadow, like a drop shadow. Brilliant. And so in here, what I need to do is I need to have 2 div tags. One is going to say Rachel, like follows. And it's going to have a class name equal to italic, which will give it a nice little slant. And you can see there now when I've saved it, Rachel's just appeared over there, which is really cool. And without padding, so my P4 needs a dash there, P-4, there you go. And now you can see how much that looks like this over here, right? Perfect, excellent. And then here on the refresh icon, I'm going to give it a class name again. And this one is going to be a little bit more complex. So what are we going to do here? And in fact, instead of a div, let's actually give this a button, because it's going to be a refresh button that we go and click. Now the button in it is going to have an SVG. So what we're going to do is go here to hero icons. So just on your internet, go to hero icons as follows, and look for the icon for refresh, because that's what I want. There we go. Arrow path, copy the JSX. Let's go back over here to our code. So I can close that down now and paste that JSX here in your button. So I've got your button and your JSX. Now I'm using Prettier to format things. So again, if you don't know about that plugin, just learn about the Prettier plugin, which is why it formatted everything really nicely for me. And the height and width of 6 looks absolutely fine to me. I'm going to leave that as is. And you can see it here now. There's the refresh button. And actually, when we go and click this button, what I want it to do is what we had it do before. This is going to be handle the reset conversation. So here we're just going to have it reset conversation when it gets clicked. Brilliant. And then in the class name here, what we're going to do is make this quite special. It's going to have some conditionals. So we'll have transition all with a duration 300, because I want this to change when it gets hovered on nice and slowly. I don't just want it to go from the color it's going to be, which is blue, to pink immediately. I want it to happen over 300 milliseconds. And so here it's going to be defaulted to text blue 300, but when we hover, and that's when the transition will happen, it'll be text pink 500 with a space. Make sure you put the space in. It's very important, because then we're going to plus, we're going to add to this here, open and close parentheses. If it's resetting, and here's our conditional, then I also wanted to do animate pulse, and this will give it a pulsing effect. Now I've just saved that, and it's neatened the code up for me, and you can see how it's structured it. So when we go and run the reset conversation, is resetting set to true? So it'll be resetting, which means it'll fade in and out, in and out, in and out. Then it's done running. It'll stop fading in and out, in and out, in and out. Perfect. Now I think in terms of our top section here, that looks pretty good. And if I hover over my refresh, yep, there you go. You can see that's working. Now if I click it, it should fade in and out, but I think it's actually running very, very, very quickly. In fact, I'm going to have it alert to me when it's run. So here I'm going to say alert response.data. Let's just see that here. Yep, it's running so fast that it doesn't even have time to pulse and flash in the animation. But if someone had a slow signal, that would actually do it for them. And you can see here, it's still running. I don't know if you can see it pulsing there behind my mouse, because I haven't okayed this. I haven't actually okayed this yet. Now I'm going to hit OK, and that's actually just alerting me with the response data, which is fine. Another thing you can do is also just console.log response.data. Let me show you what that looks like. So here, when we go and open up our console, remember that's on view, developer, and developer tools here. When I go and click that here, it's very instant, because of course this is all internal here on my own local machine. But if this was over a network, it might take a bit longer. You can see it says message conversation reset, which is the same thing as before I showed you when you go to network, and you can see it here. You can check whether or not your calls are working and look into the responses to what might be the problem. But this is all working absolutely perfectly. So I'm going to close this down here, put this back to where it was and get rid of that console log. Excellent. The title is done and dusted. So far we're doing well. Let's build this actual recording function over here. And to do that, I just want to do a bit of styling first with our controller. So here I'm going to go into our controller here where we've got placeholder, as we can see over there. And I'm going to give this area a name. I'm going to call it recorder. And I'm just going to comment that out with backslash there, right? So here I've got recorder. This is just to let me know what I'm putting there. And we're going to put this in a div tag as such. That is going to have a class name of fixed, because it's going to be at a fixed position right at the bottom of the screen as such. So here, if I just go bottom-0 and I just put hello, you'll see hello is appearing at the bottom, the very bottom of my screen down there. Brilliant. So that's fixing it to the bottom. And here I'm going to say width full with a padding Y of 6 and a border at the top. So border T. Let's center the text as well, because I want everything at the center. And now what I want to do is show you how to get like a gradient here in terms of a color scheme on the background, because it looks, well, in my opinion, it looks modern and it looks really, really nice as well. So the way that we go and do that is we say background gradient to right. And you can see here I could use to bottom right, to top right, but I'm going to use to right. And it's going to be from, let's use sky 500 to green 500 as such. Great. And when I save that, you can actually see now, let me scroll to the left here again, we have that gradient wrapping around hello. Hello is centered right in the middle here because we have text center. And this whole thing is placed at the very bottom of this part here of the screen. So everything beneath the title, because remember the title is up here and both of them are within this overall controller. All right, so that is looking pretty good over there. Now, what I'd like to do is actually create my recorder here as well. So I'm going to put div and we'll actually import our recorder shortly. But what I'd like to do is go class name and let's just say flex justify center and items center. So everything's going to be centered vertically and horizontally with a width that's full. And then I'm going to just put another div tag. Probably don't need that div tag, but I'm just going to put it there for now. And here I'm just going to say recorder like that. And now it says recorder, because what I'd like to do is actually create a record message component. And that component is going to handle the recording of the message, etc., and feed that information back to this handle stop. So we're going to create this recorder component in a minute. It's going to take in this function for handle stop, and when it stops recording, it'll trigger this function to run, which will update the messages that we're going to render out later on. And we will render the messages out over here. I hope it's making sense. I'll see you in the next one when we create our record message components here. It's time to actually go ahead and get this recording functionality that you can see here in the image actually structured over here. And so to do that, we're going to create a new component. So go to new file as such. And what should we call that component? We'll call it record message. And that'll be .tsx, because this is another component, RFCE as follows. And then in our controller, we'll come back here and import that. So import control or record message, sorry. And there's our record message. And I'm just going to go and add that in as follows right now. Now, what are we actually going to need to pass in there? Because we need to actually pass this handle stop, because when it stops recording, I want this function to run. And so we're going to say handle stop is equal to this handle stop function here. And so now in record message, we can go type props is equal to as follows, handle stop, and this will be any, because it's a function, and any just gets us there much quicker. And here I'm going to say props. And under handle stop here, I'm going to go and bring that in as follows, just like we've done a million times before. And you can see here it says record message. So we can see it's now bringing in this record message as we wanted it to. Now we're going to need something else here as well. I'm going to get rid of this import React from React because we don't need it. I'm going to import React media recorder. Now you should have that. If you don't, go down to your package.json. Just make sure that you have all the same, basically all the same packages that I've got listed out here. One of them is React Media Recorder 1.6.6. And make sure that you do what we did in the environment setup section where we go yarn -- exact, right? So you should have that. You should have Axios. You should have all of this if you got your JSON file copied over correctly. So you should have that React Media Recorder, and just make sure it's also the same version as what I am using over here. Brilliant. And then what else do we want? We need a record icon, because right now I actually don't have an icon that looks anything like this. So what we're going to do is create another component is here as well. And I'm going to call that here record icon. So record icon.tsx as follows. Let's do RFCE. And now we're going to have a record icon. And here in record message, we can go and import record icon from record icon. Now, right now it's not an icon. It just says record icon on it, but that's fine. We'll sort that out in a minute. Now, instead of having this record message as such here, what we want is React Media Recorder. So here we're going to put React Media Recorder, and then here we're going to close that off as follows. And in fact, we don't even need to close this off. What we can do is make this a self-closing tag by doing the following. Now, React Media Recorder takes in a number of parameters here. So one of them is going to be audio, and the other one is going to be on stop, and that's going to be equal to handle stop as follows. So you can pull this right here into on stop handle stop, so that when it stops recording, it knows to call this function, which is actually coming from our controller component over there. For the render part, so here I'm going to go render is equal to, and then what I want to do here is render something else. So what we're going to do is put in open and close parentheses, and I'm going to destructure here status. I'm going to pull in start recording, and I'm going to pull in stop recording, just like this as follows. And then once we're done with that, here I'm going to go and return something here. Let me just put div for now and save so you can see what this actually looks like. But essentially what it's going to do is now return some JavaScript, some JSX, I should say. Think of it like HTML, right? That's what it's going to go and render here for us now as part of this component. And that's going to look something like this. I'm just going to say hello for now and hope that that jumps a line. It doesn't, so I'm going to carry on here and say I want a div tag with a class name equal to margin top 2. And there we go. It's now jumped down a line, so it'll make it easier for you to see what's going on. And here between that, I want a button. And that button is going to be my record button. So what we're going to have with the button is we're going to have an on mouse down, and that's going to trigger a function that says start recording, which is this here, which we're pulling in from React Media Recorder. That's going to start recording the audio for us. And then I also want to have an on mouse up. So here I'm going to have on mouse up as follows, and that is going to be equal to stop recording, like such. And then on stop, as you know, when it does stop, it's going to call this handle stop function as we mentioned before. Okay, so it's all getting quite clever. Let me save that so it jumps down and you can read it a bit better. And now let's go class name, and that is going to be equal to background white, padding 4, rounded full as follows. Right, so that's this white background over here, and the padding 4, the space between the icon we're about to go and create. And where we're going to put that icon, we're going to put it right here. So now if I save that and I go look at this here, you can see that's what it's done. Now we'll create the icon and test that out shortly, but what I just need to do is finish up some things here, and we'll then do that in the next video, because I want to first pause here for a second and talk through what's going on, just in case any of you are feeling a bit lost. And then here I'm going to put a p tag, paragraph, and this is where we're going to bring in this status here. This will again be something React Media Recorder gives us, and here this will be class name, and that's going to be equal to margin top 2. It'll be text white as follows, and font dash light. And so when I save that, you can see right now it's idle. It's not doing anything. Right? Let's talk through what's actually going on here. So React Media Recorder is an audio recorder. It's been pre-built for us in React. So if you Google React Media Recorder, you can actually see the package here. This is where I got it from. And so it's a pre-built package for recording audio, right, on your browser. And so it actually shows you how it works. I've just modified the code so that it's a bit more advanced and works for what we needed to. But this is a really impressive package. Not that their package isn't advanced. It's very advanced. I'm very impressed by it. But it needs to be modified for what we need it to do. So that's brilliant. That's what React Media Recorder is. And it needs some parameters. So right now, this is going to be audio on stop. When it stops, we want it to run a function, and it gives us the ability to do that. And it allows us to start recording and stop recording. And we can pass the functions to start and stop that we are destructuring from React Media Recorder, from this render. We can actually pass those into this button. And when we click on this button we've created, it will go and do that. You can see it here, requiring media recording and stop. So you can actually click it and play with it. And you just need to make sure that on your Google Chrome, you do allow audio recording. It will show a warning for you here if you do click that to say, hey, are you okay with audio recording? Just make sure you hit yes. Otherwise, this course will end here for you. There will be nothing more to do. So, just go ahead and do that. And now in the next video, let's just go quickly and add in the icon so that it looks more like something nice and professional like that, rather than just saying icon over here. Time to update this record icon component so that it looks better and more professional and something like this. I wanted to animate, and I wanted to perform in such a way where the user knows they are recording something. And so to do that, what we're going to use is the status here, because when a user starts recording, the status changes to recording. And so when it does that, we can trigger this icon to behave differently. But first, we actually need the icon. So let's go back over here to hero icons. So hero icons as follows, and just find it there on Google. And let's put in here record. And there's our microphone. That's what we're going to use over here. Now let's go here to record icon. This is where we're going to go and build out our record icon component that we created earlier. And we're actually going to pass some props into this. So here I'm going to say type props, and that's going to be equal to class text. And the reason for that is, if you think about it, if the status here goes to recording, then I want to pass that status into this over here, or I want to update the class text at least and pass that in. There's many ways I could do it, but the way I'm going to do it is just to pass in the class text, which is essentially just Tailwind code. And so that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to go and destructure that down here. So class text is going to be brought in here as props. And there we go. We can now pass that in. And so I'm going to get rid of this here, and I'm going to use a fragment. Fragment, if you don't know, because I didn't cover it in the crash course, is basically just an empty tag. It's if I don't actually need or want a div tag there, I can just use an empty tag. And so now I'm going to go and copy this JSX, and I'm going to paste it in here as follows. And when I save it, because of Prettier on the library that I have, the installation here, what do we call that again? The extension, sorry, that we have over here. Because I have the extension for Prettier, it's auto formatting this. I know I'm talking about that a lot, but it does save me a lot of time, so I thought I would mention it again. And so the only change I need to make here is around this class name, because I want this to be quite large. I want it to be a width of 12. I want it to be a height of 12. And I want that to have a space between it there, because I'm going to then add this class text. And again, that space is very important, right? So we add that in so that it can join whatever Tailwind code I'm basically going to pass in here. Now, if we go back to our Rachel chatbot over here, where we have that icon, we can now bring this record icon in. So I'm going to bring it in as follows, like that. And I'm going to give it a class text just right now of blank, just so you can see it there, right? There it is. I think that's starting to look really cool, but we're not done yet. So here with this class text, what I'm going to do here is get rid of that for a second. And I'm going to say, if the status here, we're going to put another conditional here. If it is recording, that's what the status is. It's equal to recording. Then what I wanted to do is I wanted to animate pulse and make text red 500 so the user knows it's recording. Else it can have text sky 500. So that's what the color will be if it's not recording, which you can see now it's blue and it looks just the same as our image there. And if it is recording, it will pulse in and out. It will animate and it will go red. Should we test it out? I think so. Let's go and record. Oh, I let go of my mouse too quickly. Let's try again. This is me holding my mouse down and recording some audio. When I let go, it stopped. Brilliant. That is working fantastically well. Now, the only problem is we can't hear or see our audio, and that's what we're going to start working on now, because when this is running, it's calling this handle stop function, which is in our controller, handle stop, but that's not doing anything. I could just have it alert and say, hello. Let's just do that for now so you can actually see it working. So here, let's record and then end. And there you go. This pops up, hello, the minute I let go. Great. So we know that function's working. It's being called, but it's not doing anything. And that's what we're about to go and change. Now, what's essentially happening when we go and record our message is when it goes and triggers the handle stop function, it's actually going to try to pass in what's known as a blob URL. This is a URL that essentially contains the audio file that we want to show. And so that'll come through as a string. And so just to show that's actually working, I'm going to console.log that blob URL as follows. So let me actually go and open this up over here a bit and open up our console so you can see that there, and just refresh this as it is over here. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold down record. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there we go. It's given me this blob URL. Now I can actually show that in audio form. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const, let's just put here blob set blob. I'm going to remove this in a minute, by the way. This is just to show you what's actually going on. And this right now is just going to be an empty string, right? So that's all that's going to be. And so what I'm going to do here with the blob URL is I'm going to set blob, and I'm going to set here blob URL as follows, right? And then what I can do now that I'll have that blob set, because I'm now setting the state of that blob, what I can now go and do, and I'm going to do it over here just above this recorder, is I can put in an audio file, and that there can actually just have a self-closing tag like follows. And what I'm going to do there is just put in our source, which is going to be equal to blob. And it's actually the blob URL, but I'm going to just call it blob because that's what I've stored it as. And I can give it a class name and all of that, but here all I need to really do is just put controls. Now let's go back over here. I'm going to refresh this, and you can see that it's showing a blank audio at the moment. But if I go and hit record, hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hit record, hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can see that it has worked. It has gone and stored that audio information, and through this audio tag, it's allowed me to actually go and hit record, hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, play it back. Brilliant. And so this is how we're going to get it to work, because now that we can actually record and show our audio through these blob URLs, which is essentially what this is basically a blob URL, you can think of it like that, is we can go and store all of those in our messages. We can store those URLs and then loop through them and have them show here in order of when they were recorded, etc. So it will look just like we've got over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and these messages will just stack up. So now let's get rid of that there now. We can get rid of this audio here as well, and that set blob. And let's actually go and code this out fully so that we can now start interacting with these messages. So we need this create blob URL to actually take in some data that we're going to get from our backend fast API, and also again create a blob URL for us. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say const blob, and that's going to be equal to new blob as follows. And in there we need to pass in the data, but that needs to get into an array here. So we need to put it in these square brackets. And then here as an object, we're going to say type, and that is going to be here audio / mpeg as follows. So that's what I'm going to add there. There's our blob. And then we're going to say const URL is equal to window.url.create object URL as follows. And we're going to pass in the blob, which is essentially actually our octet stream. So if you remember, we're going to be streaming all of that data back. Well, this is what's going to convert that into something we can actually play as an audio file from our backend. And now we're going to return the URL. That's what this create blob URL is going to do. So when our backend gives us that stream of data, we're then going to take that data and convert it into the format that we need it over here. Great. So now on our handle stop function, we can get rid of this console log. I'm going to say set is loading. That's going to be equal to true. And then at the end of this running, we'll set it back here to false. And so what we're going to now do is start combining our messages. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to append recorded message, which is the message we recorded, to messages. So here I'm going to say const my message, because it's the message we recorded. Here's going to be sender, which is going to be me. I'm just going to call that me. And the blob URL, which will be the blob URL, not blurb URL, by the way, it'll just be blob URL. And because of the way JavaScript works, we don't have to call it the same name as if it's the same name. We can just put blob URL just like that. And then here const, and we'll say messages are for array is going to be equal to whatever the messages are already. Right now they're empty, but there will be some in there at some point. And then add in my message. And so that will go and add in our messages there. This is known as the spread. And so when we use the spread operator, it allows us to go and extract all the existing messages, put them back in a new array one by one, plus then the new message. And now what we need to do is convert blob URL to blob object, because we're now going to send this over to our backend. And we're going to do that actually using fetch. And here I'm going to pass in blob URL, and then that's going to have a then. And when we do that, that's going to have a REST response. And that's going to be res.blob response blob as follows. And so then once that's done, what we're going to do is have an asynchronous function run, and that's going to take that blob as follows. That then gets passed in and run yet another function. And this other function that it's going to be running here is going to be essentially our function, or we should say now our call to our backend. So what we're doing here is passing in this blob URL. So remember when we stop recording, so let's close that down. When we stop recording, it's going to pass in this blob URL. Then what's going to happen is that's going to be added to our messages so that we can actually see what we sent to Rachel. But now we need to encode that in such a way that we can actually go and save it and send it as a file, or send it as a file, I should say, and as file data to our backend. So our backend can receive it as a file. Because if you remember here, if I go to our backend, here we are actually bringing this in as a file, right? Here's the Python code. So that's what we're going to go and do over here. So here I'm going to construct audio to send file. And so const, we need to do this as form data, and that's going to be equal to new form data. If you've ever worked with forms before in JavaScript, this won't be new to you. If you ever uploaded an image or anything like this, it's all the same. And then we're going to say form data dot append. So we've created this form. We're going to append here something called file, and it's going to be the blob. That's the data for the file, and it's going to be named. We'll call it myfile.wav, because that's the format that it's in. And there we go. That's what will happen there. And now that we've got that file, what we need to do is actually send it to our backend. So I'm going to stop the video here, and then in the next video, we're going to continue and actually get that fully working. Now that we've got our form data in a file format, we need to actually go and send that over to our backend. So we're going to do that now. We're going to say send form data to API endpoint. And it's very important that your backend is running. So please make sure that your Python backend is running. You've got your Uvicorn main app going, because once again, we're going to be using that. So we're going to use Axios for this. So here I'm going to say await Axios.post, because this is now a post request, not a get request. And that's going to go to our backend, which right now is at HTTP, and that is // localhost and :8000. And the endpoint is at post-audio as follows. And we're not going to put another / on the end, so please make sure that you have it exactly as I'm showing you here, otherwise it will not work. And then let's send our form data. And what else do we need to do here? Well, we need to send our headers as well. So here we're going to say our headers are going to be as follows. It's going to have a content dash type, and that content type now is going to be audio / mpeg as follows. And then after the headers, after this curly brace here, in fact, let me save this so that it formats it nicely. What I'm going to then say after that is comma response type. So response type as follows. And again, this is very important, otherwise it will not work. It needs to be array buffer like follows. Now, why are we putting that response type? Well, this is what will handle the data that's coming back to us from the octet stream from our backend. So once we've done that, then we need to say then, and this is going to be a response, which we'll just put as any, and that is going to now return something to us that we need to handle. Now, right now we're getting an error because we haven't imported Axios. So the other thing we need to do here is import Axios from Axios as follows. Good stuff. And after the then, we are also going to need a catch. So let's also add that in now so we don't forget. And that's also going to return a function where we will handle any errors. So what are we going to put in this function that we then get back from our backend? Now remember, when we ran our backend, we had that file we could download. Well, we're not on the docs anymore on Fast API. We're not going to have that file returned here to this call we're making. And so this is where we're handling that. What we're going to end up doing is adding it to our messages and then displaying our messages here on Rachel, right? We're going to be displaying them over there. And so that's what we need to be going and doing. So what I'm going to do here is say const blob is going to be equal to response.res.data as follows. And then here const audio is going to be equal to new audio with a capital like that, open and close parentheses like such. Great. And if we just zoom down to give you a little bit of space so you can see what's going on. And then audio.source is going to be equal to create blob URL. So just this function we created up there. And what are we going to pass in? We're going to pass in this blob that was just returned to us from our backend. Great. And that's going to create the blob URL, just like we did before, just like React Media Encoder was doing for us. And now we're doing it. I'm actually showing you here how to do it, how to take this raw sort of data getting sent to us from the backend and create this blob URL with it. And then here we're going to append to audio. And so the way we're going to do this is we'll say const Rachel message, because before we had my message, now it's Rachel message, is going to be equal to sender. And the sender now is going to be Rachel, and her blob URL is going to be audio.source, because that is a blob URL, just like mine is. So you can see here we've got my blob URL, which is just very straightforward. It's getting passed from here, from this React component that we used. And we're just appending it here as messages and adding it to messages. Now we were able to send my audio over to the backend, and it sent us Rachel's response back. And we now have that message object with that blob URL that we've now gone and created from the data from our backend. And we're going to go and push that to our messages. So here I'm going to go messages for array dot push, open and close parentheses, Rachel message like such. And then here we can set our messages to be our new messages array, because we have our messages array up here. And we've now just added the latest conversation to it. And brilliant, we can now then go and display those messages. And here, just to prove it's working, we're going to play our audio. So we're just going to auto play it. And here, actually, what I'm going to do is just put set is loading to be false first. And in fact, I'm going to remove it from down here. And after that, I'm going to say audio.play, open and close parentheses, because that's a function. So it'll just play automatically. It's much better for the user experience. And when it comes to handling the error, we're going to console.error here, and we're going to put error for error, and that'll be error.message. And then here, what we'll do is also say set is loading to be false, because if there's an error, it's also not loading anymore. Excellent. Let's actually go and test that, see if it's all working. So here we've got our Python backend running. We've got our front end that's about to call that backend with the audio file. So let's go and give it a crash test. Hi, Rachel. This is Sean. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about yourself? Are you ready to put your retail skills to the test?
I'm really looking forward to putting them to the test, Rachel. And let me just tell you now, you are speaking to a whole audience on the Udemy platform who are all very excited to see you working.
Thank you for the encouragement, Sean. So let's get started. Have you previously worked in retail? And if so, what were your responsibilities?
I love it. I never get tired of it. I hope you feel the same way when you are now getting yours working. It's just so much fun. And remember, if it didn't work for you, just go back and download the code that I showed you in the introduction section, how to do that, where to go for that, and just make sure that your code is identical if you're struggling to troubleshoot. But it's really, really, really fun. And there we go. We're now having a conversation. Now, the problem is we can't see the conversation. I can't see what Rachel's saying to me. I don't know that she's thinking. There's nothing telling me that. And so finally, what we need to do is actually build out our controller component to render out the actual the status of things, what's actually happening, so that there's some user feedback. Because you can tell at the moment it's taking a while. Sometimes these APIs are really fast, like you get a message like straight away. Other times they're really slow. And I think that's just due to the demand. I mean, right now there's huge demand, and I do expect that to speed up over time. So that's what we need to do in the very next video. First, what I'd like to do though is to show you in stored JSON. Here is our conversation. It's been stored, the data's there. And if I go and close that file down and hit refresh here, it refreshes that conversation. So that data is now gone. Our data has been cleared. So that's also really good to note, really cool to actually go and play with. It's time to actually show the conversation happening, which is what we need to do over here. So if we look at our Scally draw picture over here, we need our message and then Rachel's message, etc., to show so it actually looks like a chat. So here I'm going to call this the conversation, and I'm just going to put that as such. And then here what we need to do is just create a div tag. So let's create that div tag like such, and we'll give this a class name of margin top because I wanted to push off of there a bit, and padding x of 5. Excellent. Now, what do we need to do? Well, we've got these messages, which we are right now not showing anywhere, right? So we need to actually show these messages. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to loop through them. The way you do that in JavaScript, or one of the ways, is with map. So we're going to say if there are messages, which we know there are actually, so we can just say, messages, and then here I'm just going to say .map as follows, and that's going to take audio there and index. And then what we're going to do is pass that over as follows. We need to return a div. And so this is just, if you're used to React, this is how you actually go and create multiple components for every single one of an array you have. So messages.map is basically now going to iterate over this array, which now is going to have messages from us, messages from Rachel. So let's just make sure it does. Good evening, Rachel. I hope you're well. We're about to use some JavaScript map.
Good evening, Sean. I'm doing well, thank you. Before we move on to that, can you tell me about your previous retail experience?
Okay, great. So I know that we've got some messages now with Rachel, some back and forth that we've done, which is brilliant. So now what I need to do is actually go and render them out. And so here, let's go our key, because whenever you, with React, and I didn't go through this in the crash course, whenever you do iterate and map through with JSX, the top component of your JSX needs to have a unique key. And so what we're going to do here is give it that unique key, and that'll be our index, which will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every time it iterates. And then I'm going to add to that audio.sender just for the heck of doing that to make the key even a bit more complex. And then here I'm going to say, or I should say a bit more unique, I'm going to add in the class name, and that is going to be as follows. Here we're going to say flex column, because I want this to be vertically aligned with a space. The space is very important, and then an add. And then we're going to say if the audio, in fact, let me just save that a second. Here we'll say if the audio.sender is equal to Rachel, then what I wanted to also do is go and put the items on the end. So here we'll put flex items end, and that'll align her to the right. Excellent. So that's what this here will go and do. And then we actually need to go and render this out. What are the items that it is going to show? Well, we need to show the sender. Okay, so the sender in this case is going to be me or Rachel or I. And here the way we're going to do that is we'll add another div tag over here, and we'll put a class name, and that's going to be equal to margin top -4. And here I can just put hello for now. So there you can see hello for me, hello for Rachel, because there's two messages, one for me, one for Rachel. So right now that's showing hello. And what do we need to do? Well, we need to actually go and put in a paragraph tag in here. That's what I'm going to use. Why not? And in that paragraph tag, I'm going to give that a class name. And that is going to be equal to audio.sender if that is Rachel. So we're putting another conditional in here. Then what I want to do is say text right. We'll give it a margin right of 2, make it italic, and also text green. We'll make her name green 500. Otherwise, so then colon, it's going to be margin left 2, because now it's on my side, it'll be my message. We'll make it italic and text blue 500, like such. Great, that's pretty good. And what is going to be green or blue? Well, we need to say what that is. It's going to be the audio.sender. And there we go. We know the first message is me. The second one is Rachel, because we're printing out Rachel I, and we're formatting it with a color based on who the sender is. That's really cool. And then finally, what we need to do is go and add in underneath this p tag here, the actual message itself. So here we'll just say audio message like follows, and let us go and put in that audio tag that I showed you earlier. So audio, and that's going to be source, which will be equal to audio, because that's what we're passing in here. Remember, this audio is called audio because that's what we're calling it. It's like saying for item in array, audio is that item. For audio in messages, that's what we're doing here. So source is audio, and that is going to be .blob URL as follows. And then the class name is going to be equal to appearance none. And here I'm just going to put controls. And you don't really need to put this class name appearance none in there, but that's just the way I've got it set up. And there you go. When we close this as a self-closing tag, you can now see the messages. Here's mine. Hey, Rachel, how's it going? And Rachel's right now is not playing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset everything, and that looks like it's worked perfectly. And let's say, hi there, Rachel, how are you?
Oh, I'm just peachy. Thanks for asking, Sean. Let's get started with the interview, shall we?
Brilliant. That sounds great, Rachel. I can't wait. Have you had a good day today?
Well, I'm still interviewing people, so I can't complain just yet. So, Sean, why do you think you'd make a great retail assistant?
That's that dry humor. Do you remember we programmed in some dry humor over there? I think I'd make a great retail assistant because I love to laugh, Rachel.
That's great to hear, but can you tell me how you handle or resolve conflicts with customers?
Oh, she's getting quite serious now, so she's asking a tough question. Brilliant. I'm going to reset the conversation. And now what we're going to need to do is just make sure that we actually show the user what's happening. We still haven't done that. We're showing the messages, but I'm not displaying whether or not, Rachel's computing what to say, or, whether or not we should tell the user to send Rachel a message, etc. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. So underneath here, where we've got all of this mapping, etc. going on, what I want to do is actually just go and put in two really easy and quick statements. So the first thing here is going to be messages.length, and that is going to be equal to 0. So if it's equal to 0 and loading is false, that's why we have that exclamation mark, then, let's put open and close parentheses and return a div like follows. And here this will just say send Rachel a message. This is basically saying if there are no messages, then send Rachel a message. You can see it says that over there. Let's just give it some nice styling. So here we'll say class name is equal to text center, font light, italic, and margin top 10, like follows. There you go. Send Rachel a message. That looks much neater. Now let's copy all of this here and create another one. And this one is going to be if Rachel is actually loading. So this is just going to say is loading. So just have is loading without the exclamation mark here. And this should say something like, give me a few seconds, like follows. Brilliant. And we'll actually make this animate as well so that it looks like it's loading. So it gives the feeling that something's actually loading there. Great. Let's now go and have a look at this here. Perfect. Let's try it out. Good evening, Rachel. I will be your candidate for the day. And there you can see it flashes. Give me a few seconds.
Good evening, Sean. Can you tell me why you are interested in working as a retail assistant?
Well, I have experience flying rockets to the moon and buying Twitter and starting PayPal.
That's impressive, Sean. Can you tell me more about any prior retail experience you have?
Looks like Elon Musk is not getting the job. But okay, that is brilliant. And I really admire how she brought that conversation back. Actually, one of my first jobs, Rachel, is I used to be a suit salesman. I'm not sure if I was a very good one, but I did enjoy it.
Great to hear. Sean, what do you think is the most important quality for a retail assistant to possess?
Some of the dry humor is definitely coming through. I would say the most important quality is to enjoy having fun, Rachel.
I agree, Sean. How do you handle difficult customers or complaints?
She's very good actually at asking questions. Now, interestingly, here you can see we can scroll. And that's because we put that overflow Y scroll. And you can also see that the messaging is working, right? Send Rachel a message, hello Rachel, and then give me a few seconds. And that was continually showing. This is Rachel built, and I've had so much fun with this.
Hi, Sean. Thank you for coming in today. Can you tell me a bit about your previous retail experience? Also, just a heads up, we don't actually sell any Sean-themed merchandise here. Joking.
She's brilliant. And so I think what I'd like to do in the next video is actually just take you through, changing it up a bit, maybe giving her a different role. Maybe she's not an interviewer, and then just give some closing thoughts. I'll see you in the next one. Time just to do some finishing touches here for Rachel. First thing we need to do on the front end is go to the index.html. When you go there, just get rid of this Vite plus React plus TypeScript because that is the page title. And let's call it Rachel Chat as follows. So when I save that, then when you refresh your localhost 5173, you will see up here, it now says Rachel Chat. Great. We can stop running that and we can go yarn build, and this will build everything for deployment. So let's say you wanted to go and deploy this on your web server, and we'll talk more about that in the next steps. Then once it's built, you can look here on package.json. We have dev build start. Sometimes this will be preview, but I like changing it to start. And here I'm going to say yarn start as follows. And now you can see it's running on localhost 4173. And this is no longer in dev mode, so it will run faster. Everything's compiled and it's ready to get going. So we now have our front end up and running. Now, what about our backend? So with our backend here, we can just go to unicorn main app. We don't need reload, so we can just run it like this. And this is now running as though it was in production. I'm going to quit that, but I am now going to add in the reload because we're going to make some changes in the next video. And when we go through those changes together, we're going to be updating our prompts live here in our database file. So our prompt engineering, we're going to structure things so that Rachel performs different tasks. She could be a Spanish teacher, for example, or a sales agent. And we're going to go and update her prompt engineering so she can do that accordingly. All right, so I've got my front end actually running in dev mode. I could have run this in production, but right now I've got quite a few ports working. So I'm just going to run this in dev. And I've got my backend also running in dev. It's got the -- reload on it. So everything is set up and ready to run. Now, let me take you through what I've updated Rachel to do. So here I've said, Rachel, you are a Spanish teacher. Say most words in English and try to teach me a single word in Spanish. Each message you send, you will teach me one new word. Your name is Rachel. The user is called Sean. Keep your answers to under 30 words. And then here in the random element construction, I said your response will include some random fact about Spain, or your response will include asking me to repeat something back to you in Spanish. So we've gone from taking Rachel to being an interviewer to being a Spanish teacher. Let's see how she does. Hi, Rachel. How are you? What are we learning today?
Hola, Sean. Today we're learning the word hola, which means hello in Spanish. Did you know that 44% of Spain's land is covered by forests?
Hola, Rachel. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Muy bien, Sean. Can you repeat after me? Hola.
Hola.
Muy bien, Sean. That was perfect. Do you want to learn another word?
Yes, please. Tell me how to ask for the bill.
Sure, to ask for the bill, you can say la cuenta, por favor. Fun fact, Spain is the second largest producer of wine in the world.
La cuenta, por favor. How do I ask for where is the best wine?
Great job, Sean. To ask where's the best wine, you will say, ¿Dónde está el mejor vino? Fun fact, Spain is the country with the most bars per capita in the world.
All right, so that was pretty impressive because Rachel's able to understand that we're actually having a conversation where she's teaching me Spanish, but I've changed it up a bit now. I've said, you are a salesperson who is not pushy. You are trying to sell me a trip to the Maldives by being understanding of my needs. Each message you send, you will learn more about me and construct a great sales approach. And then the same sort of stuff as before. Your response will include a fact about what I might find in the Maldives, or your response will include a random fact about the country. So let's see how Rachel does here with sales. Hi, good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Sean. How can I assist you today? I'm here to help you plan some amazing trip to the Maldives. Did you know that the Maldives has the world's first underwater cabinet meeting?
No, I didn't know that. That's actually really interesting. Why should I sign up to this trip with the Maldives? What are you trying to sell to me here?
By signing up for this trip with us, you get to enjoy stunning beaches, luxurious oceanfront villas, snorkeling, diving, and many more. We can cater to your preferences and guarantee a safe and unforgettable experience. Did you know that the Maldives has a seawall stretching over 14 kilometers filled with artificial coral reefs?
Wow, I can't wait to see that. But there are some competitors of yours that I'm interested in, so I'm shopping around. I don't know why I should go with you guys over Travel Trumps All company, that is operating in the same space as you.
I understand that you are shopping around, Sean. However, unlike other companies, we go above and beyond to offer personalized travel packages that cater to your preferences. We specialize in tailor-made travel solutions, meaning we adjust our offerings to meet your expectations. Did you know that the Maldives beaches are white, not golden, because of fine coral debris?
It's really, really, really interesting to see how well she was able to communicate what value this company could provide. So, if I was doing this for a real company, I'd actually give her context around what she can say and can't say. One of the problems with AI is it gets things wrong. And there was even a company, a case study today I was looking up, where these chatbots can essentially give you the wrong information or give the customer the wrong information on something you don't even sell. So it's very, very important to realize that. But that said, I'm really, really impressed with her performance on just the little bit of information that I gave her here. I could have primed her with a lot more information or a pretend conversation that we might have had before, etc. But this is a really, really good start. I'm really impressed with how she handled that and how she wasn't pushy, because I said you are not pushy. That's never going to work well in sales, especially not going into 2023 and beyond. And she handled it very well. Now the question becomes, what are you going to use Rachel for? And is your bot even called Rachel? What are you calling your chatbot? Please, I'd love to know. Put in the Q&A or the comments what you're actually building, and make sure that when you've got your finished product or something you're really proud of, go to the Discord and add it for others to see. Help to inspire other people, to show them what is actually possible. I know that I could take this a lot further, but probably not as far as many of you like yourself can go and take something like this. So please go and use this technology and get the most out of it that you can possibly get. But I don't know about you, I've been really impressed by how well ChatGPT handles these questions and how well these AIs can convert text to audio and back.